On ouvre les portes. Orders of the day.
Orders of the day. Ordre émanant du gouvernement. Projet de loi émanant du gouvernement.
Government Bills Commons. Resuming debate at third reading of Bill C-48, Oil Tanker Moratorium Act.
Debate. The Honourable Member for Prince Albert.
And I'd like to thank my colleagues from across the aisle for accommodating me here this morning. In fact, Speaker, sometimes I think we should do a press release whenever goodwill shows up between parties because, you know, all they see in this chamber is something other than that, and that's unfortunate because there is many opportunities or many times when we've worked together to get something done.
Here.
Mr. Speaker, I'm talking today about C-48 and the importance of making sure we get this right and the concerns that we have in Saskatchewan about how this is being handled. You know, Mr. Speaker, I sit on the Trade Committee, and when the Liberals came into power, they wanted to review TPP. They said that proper consultations was not happening, or didn't happen. They came and said we need to go back and redo these consultations before it was even ratified or signed by the Liberal government. So what did the Trade Committee do? It actually went across Canada. It redid all the work that the previous government had done, and then some. It made sure it talked to First Nations. It made sure to talk to business communities. It talked to people right across Canada. And it actually redid a lot of things. In fact, we had a lot of people saying, this is the third or fourth time I've talked about TPP, and you're doing it again. But this is the Liberals saying to us, you've got to consult. You've got to do your homework. You've got to make sure everybody's aware of it. You've got to be aware of all the circumstances before you go forward with a trade deal. Well, Mr. Speaker, I look at this and I say the same thing. When you look at the impact of what this will have on Western Canada, Canada as a whole, you need to talk to a lot of people before you can do this. I'm from Saskatchewan. You say, well, Saskatchewan, what would you care about a tanker ban? Well, you know what? A lot of people in Saskatchewan work in the oil and gas sector. A lot of people in Saskatchewan will be directly impacted. Their jobs will be impacted by this ban. And let's not fool ourselves. This isn't a tanker ban. This is to stop development in the resource sector and shipping products to the West Coast. Nothing more. It's what they really plan to do from day one, and this is how they're going to achieve it. And that's very disappointing, you know, because, Mr. Speaker, if they wanted to do this and make this major change, where was the committee meetings? When did the committee travel out there and talk about this with different varieties of people that would be impacted? When did they talk to the premiers? When did they talk to the Premier of Saskatchewan and say, this is what we plan? They didn't. This is the Prime Minister personally saying, I'm going to ban this because I think it's bad. And you look at it and you say, well, where's your science? What's your logic in doing this? Is there a problem with tankers? Are tankers unsafe? Is there a problem with the currents and everything in that area? Well, science that we have say no. In fact, if tankers were unsafe, why would we allow them down the St. Lawrence River? Why would we allow them off the coast of Atlantic Canada? There's tankers around the world today as we speak going back and forth shipping oil out of Saudi Arabia, out of Venezuela, out of places like that every day, and we hear nothing of it. So what is it about this coastline that is so unique and so special that Atlantic Canada doesn't have the same special, isn't treated the same, or the St. Lawrence? If we're concerned about the West Coast, why aren't we concerned about St. Lawrence and Atlantic Canada? It doesn't make sense. So then you say, okay, I'm from Western Canada. I look back and say, okay, well, why is he doing this? It comes back to what he said before. He does not want the resource sector to be developed. He wants to shut it down. And this is one of the corner pieces in the puzzle that'll actually do that. And what does that mean for the people of Saskatchewan, the people of Alberta, and northern British Columbia? Lost economic opportunity, lost jobs. You know, you look at the families that are employed in this sector, good paying jobs, in a good situation where they're able to raise their kids and give them a good quality of life. What's left for them? Mr. Speaker, I want to remind you, I'm going to share my time with the member from Saskatoon Grasswoods, just so you're aware of that. But I'll get back into my speech. You know, Mr. Speaker, out in Western Canada right now, there's people doing rallies. In fact, I was on the internet last night on Facebook watching a rally, I think it was Fort Nelson, where families are saying, you know, enough's enough. We've had enough. We give up. Like, please represent us. Like, please tell us that you care. Please understand that the resource sector isn't bad. Please understand that people need fuel in their cars and we'd love to provide it. And please understand we provide it in a fashion that is the most environmentally friendly in the world. So what's the deal? Where's the problem? It comes back to one thing.
Votes in BC.
This Prime Minister doesn't like the resource sector. This Prime Minister went to Paris and he wanted to be the big guy in town and make commitments. Then he comes back to Canada and what does he do? He takes the conservative commitments, the conservative targets. He brings in things like carbon tax. I'm going to shove it down your throat. You know, reality in this budget, Saskatchewan, they're looking at that and they're saying the carbon tax is really going to hurt us because we can't pass those costs on. A farmer can't pass on a carbon tax. He cannot take the cost of fuel for his tractors and combines and his machinery and put it in the price of a commodity that's traded on the world market. He can't do it. Yet he's still forced to compete against the Americans who are not doing a carbon tax, the Australians who removed their carbon tax. Other countries aren't going down this road. And what's even more sad about carbon is Saskatchewan has a game plan, a really good game plan that doesn't involve a carbon tax that will actually meet our commitments, and they won't agree to that.
Shame.
Why? How come? What's the issue there? Like, if your goal is to reduce carbon and you've got a game plan that won't impact the economy that will actually achieve that goal, why wouldn't you take it? Comes back to one thing, Mr. Speaker. Lack of respect. They want to shut down the resource sector. You know, we're hearing stories now they want to shut down the coal sector. In Saskatchewan, we have carbon capture off our coal power plants. Those power plants are 5 times less emissions than natural gas with this technology. 5 times less. But you're going to blanket and say, let's get rid of coal. What does that mean? Is that really crazy? I think so.
Here, here.
If there's technology to make coal clean and to reduce its carbon footprint, why wouldn't we say let's embrace the new technology and still use this fuel source? But no, we're going to get rid of it. Ignore science. Ignore science because, heaven forbid, Cabinet knows best.
Here, here.
And that's what's happening in all the regulations is science is now thrown out the window and it goes back to Cabinet and they're going to say, do I like this guy or not? Or, I got a toothache, so I'm going to vote no. What about science? Science needs to trump it. And when you come back to this C-48, where's the science to say that it requires this type of ban? It isn't there. There is no science. So, Mr. Speaker, you look at this and you say, wow, no consultations. Something that's going to drastically change the lives of families across Western Canada, if not all of Canada. Yet they just proceed. They just march ahead. They put the earplugs in and they just do what they do. And then they wonder why people are protesting in Western Canada. They wonder why families are concerned and upset. They can't understand why they don't love them. Mr. Speaker, you need to show respect. You need to talk to them. You need to understand why this is important to them. And you need to show common sense. Because there is no common sense of bringing oil from Saudi Arabia or Venezuela
Absolutely.
when we got oil right here in Canada. And it's actually clean oil. It's more energy environmentally friendly than any oil that you'd receive from other parts of the planet. Mr. Speaker, this piece of legislation is a bad piece of legislation. It should be thrown away. It should actually, if they want to talk about protecting the environment in that region or making areas in that region that are natural and maintained in that state, well, let's have that discussion. I have no problem with that. There might be areas that we say that's right. But take the whole region and say no more tankers? That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. It's ludicrous. You know, you just look at and people in Western Canada just can't understand this government. Like, you have so many things at your fingertips to make this economy really run really well and still meet all your environmental commitments, and you just keep chopping off the hand that feeds you. It's so sad, Mr. Speaker. It's so sad. Anyways, I'll leave it at that, Mr. Speaker, and I'll entertain some questions. But as far as this bill, I will not be voting in favor of it. It is a bad piece of legislation. It sets bad precedents. It doesn't meet the commitments that the Liberals made to voters about consulting before doing legislation. It doesn't meet the commitment about working with opposition parties and other groups in committee to have good pieces of legislation. It doesn't meet any of those criteria, Mr. Speaker. So what are they going to still do? Jam it through. And it's unfortunate they're going to do that because they're making a huge mistake.
Here,
Thank
here.
you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments to the honourable member for Fleetwood Port Kells.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are alternatives. First of all, the Enbridge line through northern BC would have been through territory that had not seen pipelines, highly ecologically sensitive area. That was the first concern. It was the concern of our party. It was the concern of the Supreme Court of Canada when they overturned the process that the previous government had used to try and get that pipeline built. But there are alternatives, and I wonder if the member would like to comment on the advent of processes to render bitumen into basically hockey pucks that can be shipped in bulk. So you're not dealing with what they call the persistent oils. These are the oils that won't evaporate if they hit the water. These hockey pucks float, and they can be easily recovered. Or has the member examined the option of refining the product more on the Canadian side in Alberta before it gets to the West Coast? Because then if it becomes a non-persistent oil, if it's something that would evaporate if it hits the water, then that would be allowed under this tanker moratorium, as I understand it. So perhaps you would like to comment on what the options may look like.
Honourable member for Prince Albert.
Well, I thank the member for his question. I appreciate your openness to say, let's look at technology and see if we can do this better and safer. That's a wise approach. But they're not doing that here. They're not doing that with coal, for example. They're just getting rid of it and saying there is no technology, so you get rid of it. You just don't allow anybody to use it. That's wrong. If there's new technologies that should be embraced, well, let's embrace them. If there's things that'll make it safer, let's embrace that too. But to take and make a moratorium right across the West Coast and say no, that's wrong. And that's what this is doing. And you haven't talked about the consultations. You haven't talked about the impact it's going to have on Western Canada or Canada as a whole. You're talking about a new technology that's come into play. Well, let's look at that new technology. But I don't think this government's willing to accept new technologies, because if they do, that means they allow the oil and gas sector to actually grow a bit. And that is a problem for them. And that's what we can't understand in Western Canada. Why is that a problem? So, Mr. Speaker, I'd encourage you to look at new technology. I'd encourage new ways of doing things. And if there's a problem, address the problem. But don't take a sledgehammer to it and say, okay, we've got rid of the problem by just making sure it's impossible to do.
De Longueuil, Saint-Hubert.
The honourable member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. I'd like to thank the member for Prince Albert for his remarks, which is sensical, and it shows that he is very honest in representing the concerns of his constituents when they see problems. And I think that everyone looked up when the question came from the opposite side with respect to an alternative way of distributing the resource in a more solid or refined form, etc. And I think that that's the objective of the debate today. We can all learn from it. If you know something, if people know something, they need to tell us about it, because what I'm hearing, Mr. Speaker, in the speeches generally on the subject is a dialogue of the deaf. If someone knows something about new technology, because earlier my colleague said that our oil was the most environmentally friendly. Well, from my perspective, it's the opposite that the people have been projecting. They've been portraying it as dirty oil. And when we see images of the oil sands, the extraction, that it's dirty, when we hear about the burning of natural gas, it creates greenhouse gas emissions, etc. So I agree with him, and I think we need to also mention the technology, clean technology used for the oil sands. So we need to talk about all of these things and focus on extraction.
Prince Albert.
Again, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my member for the question. And actually, that's why you need to have proper consultations. That's why you need to go out to the public and say, this is what we're thinking, here's the problem. And you'd be surprised what comes up for solutions. There is solutions for the problems. But if you don't want to hear the solutions, you do stuff like this. You shove it down people's throat and you get it done, so that they don't have a chance to present a solution. And that's what they're doing in this case. Mr. Speaker, I'll remind you, there's still going to be tankers going up and down the West Coast. They just won't be Canadian tankers, and they just won't be hauling Canadian oil. So we can look at all these new processes, we can look at these new technologies and embrace them. I encourage us to embrace them. But this government won't embrace them. It does everything but that. So we see things like C-48. We take a sledgehammer to it, we ban it outright, we take all the development, throw it away, when there actually probably was opportunities here to make it actually better and work for everybody involved. And that's so disappointing.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Saskatoon Grasswood.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to speak on Bill C-48, the Oil Tanker Moratorium Act. The name of the bill is actually quite curious because when we look at the facts, Mr. Speaker, we see that this piece of legislation has very little to do with banning oil tankers from the BC North Coast and everything to do with continuing this government's hurtful campaign against pipeline and oil development throughout this country, and in particular Western Canada. Little is surprising in this regard. The Liberals arbitrarily shelved the Northern Gateway Pipeline in 2016, forced the cancellation of Energy East Pipeline in 2017, and continue to do as little as possible to support the development of the Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline, which has been put on life support now, certainly this month of May. First, let us examine what the Liberals are saying that this bill will do. Time and time again, we have heard in this chamber that C-48 is about environmental protection, that by imposing this moratorium, the northern coast will be better protected, specifically against oil spills. They argue that a moratorium is the only way to safeguard against the problem and that this legislation is therefore the way forward. There are numerous and significant flaws with this jurisdiction, which mark it as both hollow and ill-advised. Firstly, there is an issue of consistency. Why are the Liberals targeting the BC North Coast for a ban on oil tankers, while they apparently ignore the presence of oil tankers along many other of our coasts in this country? Why are they making the arbitrary decision to limit the transport opportunities of oil along the North Coast and not the South? This kind of moratorium does not exist along the St. Lawrence Seaway, the Great Lakes, and it does not exist along the coasts of Newfoundland and Labrador, Nova Scotia, or New Brunswick. It does not exist around Vancouver. The fact that C-48, quite arbitrarily, only applies to the BC North Coast sheds serious doubt on the Liberal claim that the intention of this bill is about environmental protection. Secondly, this environmental jurisdiction fails to consider that a voluntary exclusion zone of 100 kilometers for oil tankers traveling from Alaska to Washington State has been in place, Mr. Speaker, since 1985. These preventive measures have already been taken prior to any sort of moratorium being put in place by the government. Additionally, these oil tankers operating at this distance from the coastline would continue to be unaffected by this legislation. Once again, we struggle to find any support for the arguments being put forward by the Liberals in favor of this bill. Thirdly, the Liberal argument that the oil tanker moratorium is the only way to protect the environment completely ignores the current and vastly extensive regulatory framework which exists for oil tankers today traveling within our waters. Canada's oil tanker safety procedures and processes still remain one of the best in the world. We recall 2014, our former Conservative government introduced and implemented many innovative measures to ensure that oil tankers operating under strict regulations and environmental protections. These measures included modernization of Canada's navigation system, the enhancement of area response planning, building increased marine safety capacity in First Nation communities, and ensuring that polluters pay for any spills and damages since 2010. Every large crude oil tanker which operates in Canadian waters must be equipped now with double hull so that any tanker in our waters is covered by 2 full layers of watertight surfaces in order to ensure safety and environmental protection. Oil tankers are consistently monitored by our National Aerial Surveillance Program, and our data sharing and communication technologies rigorously guide oil tankers traffic across this country in order to reduce the risk of collisions. Do these kind of regulations and protections exist for tankers exporting from oil from, let's say, Venezuela or Saudi Arabia? There's no way, Mr. Speaker. So given the strong and extensive regulations which exist for oil tankers traveling through Canadian waters, it is very clear that any jurisdiction for a moratorium on oil tankers for environmental reasons is completely unfounded. What then is this bill all about? The answer, of course, is that it's about the Liberals' ideologically objective to restrict Canadian pipeline and energy development as much as possible. The bill can mostly accurately be described as a moratorium on any and all pipeline development along the coastline of northern BC, and as a result, this legislation will kill any economic opportunities which communities from this region would otherwise have had due to the increased energy investment in that area. And we're already seeing that, Mr. Speaker. This ban would seriously hurt many, and I say many, First Nation groups which have stood to gain from a pipeline in their area. The Eagle Spirit Pipeline. It's a $16 billion project which would stretch from Bruderheim, Alberta to Grassy Point along the northern coast of BC, which would be forced to reroute to Hyder, Alaska, and its endpoint. So if this pipeline ban is imposed, the Eagle Spirit Pipeline project is directed by more than 30 First Nations across northern BC and Alberta, and these communities stand to lose a significant major economic opportunity due to this Liberal government's ideological and political posturing. Bill C-48 has been brought forward without any true or any meaningful consultation with the First Nation communities, which would be severely impacted by the implementation of a pipeline ban in northern British Columbia. Let's quote Calvin Heelan, the chairman of Eagle Spirit and a member of the Lax Kw'alaams First Nation, who says that First Nations are completely opposed to government policy being made by foreigners when it impacts their ability to help out their own people on reserves. He continues by saying that the energy industry is critical to Canada's economy. No doubt it is. And by some reports, we are losing an unbelievable $50 million a day. We are losing $50 million a day. So that would be many schools, that could be hospitals that we could build here in Canada every single day. That is simply unacceptable. That this government refuses to consult with these groups to allow them to develop energy infrastructure, which would create significant economic opportunities in these much-needed communities. However, this behavior coming from the Liberals is also unfortunately unsurprising, considering that it is this government which has overseen the largest decline in Canadian energy investment in the past 70 years. We have talked a lot in this House, Mr. Speaker, about $80+ billion taken out of the economy, along with jobs in the energy sector, well over 110,000 workers unemployed in Saskatchewan and Alberta. A moratorium on pipelines in northern BC is just another example of this government's blatant hostility towards our energy sector and the jobs and the economic opportunities which would supply to communities across this country. This government has used the justification of environmental protection as a smokescreen for its anti-Canadian energy policies. But when this argument is held up against the facts, we see it for what it is, a desperate attempt to mask the Liberals' ideological agenda. There are no real winners as a result of the northern BC pipeline moratorium, except American consumers who receive discounted prices on our Canadian oil. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Questions and commentaires. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Social Development.
You know, listening to some of the members, in particular from the prairies, talk about our great coastlines and waterways, and then ask what's the difference between the St. Lawrence Seaway and the coast of northern BC, it's a little like saying I've got a backyard garden, I know about agriculture. There is a very big difference between the St. Lawrence Seaway and the northern coasts of BC. For example, the St. Lawrence Seaway is man-made. That's one of the critical differences. And so I guess the question for this is does the member in the party opposite really think that the St. Lawrence Seaway should be governed with exactly the same rules as the most sensitive marine environments in our country, regardless of where they are, regardless of whether there's access, regardless of even a city or a real port on the site? Is that really what the Conservatives are saying, that all coastlines are equal and should be treated as such?
The Honourable Order. The Honourable Member for Saskatoon Grasswood.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a direct attack on the northern coastline of British Columbia. I mean, we've talked about it in our speech here. There are no regulations to bring in Venezuelan oil, to bring in Saudi Arabian oil. They seem to think that's very good to bring it into New Brunswick. We don't even have a talk about southern BC. This bill talks about northern BC. I just talked about the opportunities of First Nations. They want to join the economy in this country, and they want to shut it down. We've heard from many groups in northern BC that want an opportunity of employment, an opportunity of prosperity, only to be shut down by this bill and the Liberals.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The revisionist history here is kind of breathtaking. I mean, the Northern Gateway pipeline was defeated by First Nations on the basis that the Harper Conservative government failed to consult them. So this is challenging language. My question to my Conservative colleague is, given what we're now hearing from this quarter of the House about the Conservative Party's commitment to science and evidence, how does the member view the previous Conservative government's sabotaging of the Environmental Assessment Act, the removal of protections under the Navigable Waters Protection Act, where was the science that told this government it was a good idea to remove habitat protection from the Fisheries Act?
The Honourable Member for Saskatoon Grasswood.
I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for a question. You know, the Conservatives, we've done a lot in the last 9.5 years in government. And they're undoing it in the last 2.5 years. I mean, when I can stand here, Mr. Speaker, and talk about Eagle Spirit and all that they want, the opportunities in northern BC, they're being shut down here today. When this bill passes, and if it passes, Mr. Speaker, this will be disastrous for northern communities. The same with Kinder Morgan, I should add. We have more First Nations in BC that approve the pipeline that don't, and yet we can't get it done.
Shame. The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
It's hard to know where to start. I thank the member for Saskatoon Grasswood, but let me point out to him that in 1972 there were extensive consultations when the then government of the day, under former Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, enacted a moratorium against oil tanker traffic in the passage that includes Hecate Strait, Dixon Entrance, and that area has the fourth most hazardous body of water on the planet, and the transit is in interior waters with an immediate threat to Haida Gwaii and the BC coast. It is incomparable to any other body of water on any Canadian coastline, and the moratorium was respected by progressive Conservative federal governments, so-called provincial governments. It didn't matter what government was in power, provincially or federally, until Stephen Harper, with zero consultations, ignored the moratorium and took it away. Now, I challenge him to say why a government should not be allowed to fulfill an election promise and legislate the moratorium we had for 4 decades.
About 40 seconds. The Honourable Member for Saskatoon Grasswood.
Even 40 seconds might be too long, Mr. Speaker. We're losing $50 million a day. We're losing $50 million a day. 110,000 jobs have been eliminated in my province and in Alberta because of the oil sands, because of this Liberals' attack on oil in Saskatchewan and Alberta. This is just another example, Mr. Speaker. The Liberals are not listening to Canadians, and they're going to dearly pay for it next year, I might add.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear.
In debate, the Honourable Member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
I thought you had Mr. Aldag next. Not true, eh? All right.
First of all, I think the honourable member is referring to the honourable member for Cloverdale Langley City, not by name, of course. We wouldn't want to do that. But as I think there was a change earlier to accommodate one of the earlier speakers, as I understand it. And so if the honourable member is ready, that's who I have next, as far as I know. Honourable member for Nanaimo Ladysmith is prepared.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to speak once again to the North Coast partial oil tanker ban. That we have it. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak on Bill C-48, the North Coast partial oil tanker ban. That we have this in place is a credit to decades of work by North Coast people. I also want to acknowledge the work of my colleague, the Member of Parliament for Skeena-Bulkley Valley. His version of this bill in the previous Parliament toured the entire country. Thousands of people came out under the Defend Our Coast banner. It was very powerful and gave this government, the Liberal government, the mandate to implement, and so we're glad to see the legislation. We'll be voting in favor. We tried, our New Democrat colleague from Port Moody Coquitlam tried quite hard to strengthen it. There is more ministerial discretion than we would like to see. Some of our colleagues have been quoted saying you could drive an oil tanker through this bill, this moratorium. Nevertheless, we're going to vote in favor, and we're glad to see some version of it moving forward. I do want to say, though, as a member representing the south coast of British Columbia, representing the Salish Sea, Nanaimo Ladysmith, we have very complicated shorelines, very fast-moving currents, very sensitive ecology, and 450 islands in between the area that I represent on Vancouver Island and the mainland of British Columbia and the U.S. border. Extremely complicated shipping traffic, very sensitive ecology and shorelines that we know if there's any size of an oil spill would be extremely difficult to clean up. Given that the industry standard for oil spill response is a 10% cleanup of oil, let me say again, members representing the southern part of British Columbia are just as committed to protecting their coastline and the economy and the jobs that depend on it, and are just as concerned about the impacts of oil tanker traffic, especially when it is an unrefined raw product that has no value-added jobs in Canada, has no energy security benefit for Canada, and certainly for British Columbians, the shipment of what we view as an increased level of danger by more oil tanker traffic and by a thicker unrefined product is all downside, no upside for our coast. And so we ask the government, if you are willing to put in strong measures for the North Coast, why not for the South Coast? We have still remains that there is no peer-reviewed science that tells us how bitumen would react in the marine environment, in rough water with sediment in it. I mean, who's going to have an oil spill with no waves? It's just, it boggles the mind that this Liberal government could have approved the Kinder Morgan pipeline in the absence of evidence that bitumen can be recovered from the marine environment and that our response times are adequate to clean it. What we do have is some suspicion or concern from what has been observed from other times that bitumen has spilled in the marine environment, that the diluent, which allows the raw bitumen, unrefined bitumen to flow, may evaporate very quickly. The evaporation itself may pose dangers to first responders, and so it might be that even the regularly allowed response time has to be, the first responders have to keep away. Certainly if there was a bitumen spill in a heavily populated area like downtown Vancouver, 1 million people affected by a spill that would have toxic fumes, much more than a refined product. And we saw that in the Kalamazoo spill, which was in fresh water, but that was a huge occupational exposure. And then when the first responders have to stay away and can't get to the spill as quickly as they can, then that means that it has more time to evaporate off, and then an increased risk to sink. And at that point, I've got folders full of science reports, Polaris, the Royal Society of Canada, and others who say the stickiness and the impact on marine wildlife, sea otters, all kinds of seabirds, let alone what would happen if you end up with bitumen coating the bottom of the seabed. The damage that would be done trying to clean that up is really so alarming to contemplate. And so we ask, again, how is it that although the North Coast oil tanker partial ban is being lauded by many of us on the coast and in the environmental movement, we do not have a concomitant level of protection in the south, and we do not have the confidence that our oil spill response is in a respectable and responsible place. My understanding is that the response regulations have not been updated since 1995. It turns out I'm splitting my time with the member for Courtney Alberni. And I look forward to his speech. We're full of surprises today. That it's not been since 1995 that oil spill response regulations have been tightened. We had this government, the Liberal government, has had 2.5 years in order to make that change. They have not. In my region, it's my understanding that if there is an oil spill, the corporate entity responsible for the oil spill has 72 hours to get there. They're not in violation of the regulations unless they don't within 3 days have booms and an oil spill response plan enacted. How could that ever give any of us any confidence? Yeah. And if this government or if the previous government, honestly, if they really wanted to have pipelines approved and to have coastal people have any measure of confidence, then surely they would have upgraded and tightened those response times, as have Washington State repeatedly, as has Alaska. And I'll tell you, when I was chair of Islands Trust Council, what we heard from our fellow governments, both at the local, the regional, and the state level, they're extremely concerned about Canada's and British Columbia's poor level of preparedness for an oil spill. Because the oil does not recognize the international boundary, they're very concerned that given the fast-moving currents, that if we're shipping, first of all, a dangerous product for which there is not adequate response technology, but also if we don't have the response times in place, that oil will move very quickly to their side of the border. And certainly their aquaculture industry is extremely concerned about our poor level of preparedness. And so I'm very glad to continue to see the Washington State Governor salute the British Columbia New Democrat Premier, John Horgan, for the very strong stand that he is taking to say, I believe that the oil spill response plans for BC's south coast are inadequate, and we're seeing now in court the provincial government saying as soon as the oil hits the shoreline, it's our responsibility and jurisdiction, and so if the government is not going to adequately regulate to protect our resource, then we will ourselves increase or consider implementing regulations that would protect coastal ecology and coastal jobs. To my regret, I see that yesterday the federal Liberal government has agreed to intervene, has decided to intervene in that case to oppose it, to oppose my premier's efforts to better protect the coast, where the Liberal government has failed to. Our New Democrat leader, Jagmeet Singh, urged the Prime Minister to join with the British Columbia Premier to cooperatively together go to the courts and ask for clarification. That would have been leadership, and it would have been a real sign of cooperation and trying to get the right answer. To instead see the federal government intervening against the British Columbia government, which is simply trying to strengthen and increase the safety net, is extremely discouraging. And what a strange way of spending both your legal resources and your taxpayers' dollars. I mean, how on earth could that be a good expenditure when what we need to be doing is strengthening the ecological safety net and not fighting against stronger measures in court? Another piece that we, when I was the Islands Trust Council chair, we heard from our Washington State colleagues how important it was to have geographic response plans in place for oil spill prevention and preparedness. These are micro studies of a particular region that would be enacted in the event of an oil spill. And so whoever was the responsible spiller, this is likely to be a corporate entity, and they do a pretty good job of looking after their own business. They would know you have to boom this geographic response plans. We'd love to see them in place, and I'm pleased that the BC government is pushing for that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to speak in support.
Before I go to questions and comments, I simply want to advise the honourable member for Nanaimo Ladysmith that she was in fact correct. That there was a mix-up here, for which I take responsibility, that we probably should have gone to the honourable member for Cloverdale Langley City. We'll get to him in due course, but that was a bit of a mix-up, so I appreciate her readiness to carry on as she did. Questions and comments, the honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate that the NDP are going to be supporting the legislation. I think that's a positive, as it's been talked about consistently as we've been debating this. This is an issue which has been important to the government. It was raised during the last federal election. It's the government fulfilling that commitment. I'm a bit disappointed in regards to the NDP's approach in terms of the national interest and how they're prepared to forego that based in terms of what they perceive as just a one position of the environment has to be taken into consideration, and there is absolutely no consideration given to the national interest. And when she made mention, for example, Mr. Speaker, that she was disappointed that the federal government's actions in regards to courts and not being on side with British Columbia, I wonder if she would not at the very least acknowledge that the national interest does take into consideration our environment. It does take into consideration the economy, and the Trans Mountain pipeline is an excellent example of that. And even within her own NDP party, there's a controversy. You have an NDP premier in Alberta saying we want the transcontinental. Does she believe that that NDP premier has any merit whatsoever to her argument?
For Nanaimo Ladysmith.
I salute the Alberta New Democrat Premier Rachel Notley. She campaigned on a strong platform of standing up for the existing jobs and industry in her province, and she is doing that. I also really salute New Democrat Premier John Horgan, who campaigned against the Kinder Morgan pipeline and said loudly he would use every measure that he could within his limited provincial jurisdiction, and he is doing that to protect the coast. From my perspective, when I hear in Kinder Morgan's filings to the National Energy Board that the permanent jobs in British Columbia are 50, and we recognize the tens of thousands of jobs that are dependent on a clean environment, on sport fishing, on tourism, on everything on the coast. For us, it does not compute. And I argue through you, Mr. Speaker, that the true national interest would be for the Liberal government to have kept its election promises, to redo the Kinder Morgan review, but most importantly, to truly reconcile with Indigenous people. If you're going to sign off on UNDRIP, if one is to sign off on UNDRIP, then you certainly cannot ram a pipeline through and fight First Nations in court. And it's in the national interest to protect the environment, and that's what we are doing.
Hear, hear.
Member for Central Okanagan's Milkmean Nicollet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate this member's contribution to this debate. Mr. Speaker, politicians will often pick a position and then try to find facts that support their position. I completely understand that. But when she raises concerns about the science regarding diluted bitumen, in the recent Our Response to BC's Policy Intentions paper for engagement activities related to spill management by the government, it says federal scientists have published or presented over 60 papers on diluted bitumen science in peer-reviewed forests since 2012. And I also, just to continue here, to determine the fate, behavior, potential impacts, and effectiveness of response techniques on a variety of heavy oil products. And this research has ranged from lab-scale and pilot-scale tests of oil spill behavior to field trials and evaluations of response technology. Findings have shown diluted bitumen behavior falls within the range of conventional oil products, and so conventional mechanical recovery methods have been found to be effective. Mr. Speaker, The science on this is very clear. Can she point to actual evidence shown to the contrary? And will the member then go to other arguments that may back her position? Because science should not be one of them.
And I'm O'Lady Smith.
I started writing in my capacity as Islands Trust Council Chair to the Conservative Minister of Transport and Environment starting in 2011, saying, show me the science that you have. Apparently that caused a bit of a ripple in the department because it hadn't been studied. The marine environment studies are extremely limited. Just a year ago, the transport minister, the Liberal transport minister, was quoted on the radio saying, we don't know how it reacts, and we, through the Oceans Protection Plan, are going to study its behavior in the marine environment. And I've got a file full of peer-reviewed papers that say this needs more study in the marine environment, in estuaries and places where there would be sediment and waves.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Courtenay Alberni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's a huge honor to rise today to speak on this bill. Mr. Speaker, first, before I get started, I do want to, first of all, acknowledge all of my colleagues here in the House, especially the Conservative Party. We've had an incredible loss this week to our good friend from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes. And Mr. Speaker, I thank you. And it's important that I acknowledge not just the loss of our friend, but really the strength and courage of everyone in this House, but especially our colleagues from the Conservative Party for coming back here in honor of their colleague and the constituents in our country, showing up for work yesterday. I was at committee, and I was just really touched by how hard everyone was dealing with this issue, at the same time showing up for work, and I really want to commend them, and my heart goes out to them, to the family, and all of the constituents of our good friend. So I have to bring that up, Mr. Speaker, before I get started. So, Mr. Speaker, we're speaking on a bill to ban tankers on the North Coast, and certainly I appreciate the efforts that are being made on this bill. Of course, there's some gaps that we have concerns about, certainly around ministerial jurisdiction and the ability for a minister to override some of this legislation. These are serious concerns because it could really put this bill and push it aside and open the door for something that we wouldn't want to see happen, and that's tanker traffic in an area that is pristine. And we've heard colleagues, certainly from the Liberal bench, talk about the importance of this ecosystem. We've heard from colleagues here about the ecosystem. We've heard the Conservatives talk a lot about jobs, and I'll get to that, Mr. Speaker, in a minute. But, Mr. Speaker, most important is that we are making a decision here around legislation that protects our ecosystems for generations to come. We know how valuable those ecosystems are. I live in the coast, so I really understand how important it is, our coastal waters. We rely on clean oceans for our food, for our economy, for our culture. It's precious that we protect our oceans, and we do everything we can to mitigate any chance that we could destroy these ecosystems forever, or even for decades, and really upset our whole way of life. So, Mr. Speaker, when I say that about our way of life, we don't just use the ocean for transportation and the things I outlined. The ocean's our home. It's our home, Mr. Speaker. And when I think about the North Coast, I think about the South Coast, because there's no dividing line, there's no border between the North and the South Coast. There's no wall between the North and the South Coast. Currents and wind and tides, they move the water from the North Coast to the South Coast. The fish migrate from the North Coast to the South Coast, our salmon. They move up and down. We move up and down as coastal people. So there is no wall. There's no defining wall. So when I hear the Prime Minister come forward and talk about, that tankers don't belong on the North Coast, I have a real hard time understanding why he thinks they belong on the South Coast and want to increase tanker traffic sevenfold, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday we had a really great speech that was given by my friend from Vancouver Quadra. She spoke, and I'll read some of the words. She talked about witnessing the environmental, economic, and social devastation caused by the Exxon Valdez and BP catastrophes in the Gulf of Mexico. One major spill along BC's shorelines would threaten fragile ecosystems, endanger wildlife, harm lives and communities, and jeopardize many of our tens of thousands of coastal jobs. It is simply not worth the risk, end quote. So, Mr. Speaker, she said it there. It was really clear that this spill that happened over 25 years ago is still impacting the community up there and what it did to those communities, Mr. Speaker, and it caused devastation. So she expressed that, and again, of course, I appreciate her efforts. I really do. It's genuine about her supporting this ban on the North Coast. My question is, she couldn't square it when I asked her how she could support the Kinder Morgan pipeline. And so I have a lot of concerns by what I'm hearing from the Liberals talking, really, I feel, both sides of their coast or both sides of their mouths. I'm not sure, but I'm confused. So, I have questions. And the Prime Minister, and I will pivot to Kinder Morgan because it is important that we talk about the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion. It is integrated. When we're talking about a ban on the North Coast that, again, is connected to the South Coast, we can't lose sight that this is a government now that is looking to approve a pipeline that is going to increase tanker traffic 7-fold. And the Prime Minister said in his campaign in 2015, if he's Prime Minister, Kinder Morgan will have to go back to the drawing board, saying that the process, and he said the process needs to be redone. So redone was a 3-member panel that traveled around listening to selected people and groups that heard loud and clear from southern British Columbians that we didn't want a pipeline. So I'm confused. If that's the new process, if that's the renewed process, and the government still moves forward, then there's not a lot of trust. There's not a lot of trust in the new process, the 3-member process that was delivered to coastal people. And I think that, Mr. Speaker, again, there was another quote from my friend from Vancouver Quadra. She said about this promise, about the tanker ban, she said, a promise made, promise kept. Let's talk about promise made, promise broken, because that's Kinder Morgan, Mr. Speaker. That's electoral reform and a number of things. The list could go on and on and on. But what we heard was something that was a promise to protect coastal British Columbians. And we know, Mr. Speaker, we don't have the science, the evidence-based decision-making that this government says they're going to abide by on how we're going to clean up raw bitumen. As a coastal person, just in the last couple of years, we've had a spill, the spill in the Heiltsuk territory of diesel that we couldn't clean up, that infected their shellfish, that affected their way of life, affected their economy, their ability to sustain themselves. We saw after the Conservatives closed Kitts Base, Kitts Lifeboat Station, the 14-hour delay to deal with a bunker fuel spill. How are they going to deal with a super tanker full of crude oil spilling, Mr. Speaker? They can't. The Simi Shura that was off the coast of Haida Gwaii, we were worried that was going to land on the beaches of Haida Gwaii, on the traditional territory of the Haida people. And luckily, Coast Guard got up there in time. Now, this government's saying that we're going to get 2 tugs, and that's going to save us. I'm sorry, British Columbians don't feel safe about the 2 tugs saving us and protecting us from an oil spill, Mr. Speaker. I mean, we'll appreciate it and we'll take it. But we're not feeling that confident based on these scenarios, whether it be the Queen of the North. These are all examples that we can cite. We had a spill in 1988, off of the coast of Washington, and it landed as far north as where I live in Tofino, Mr. Speaker, on our beaches. So this isn't going to might happen. It will happen at some point, Mr. Speaker. And so I have huge concerns around, the pipeline. The other part of the conversation that I don't feel is happening, and there's misleading information that, we hear about the jobs are going to be lost, that it's going to allow more foreign oil to come into Canada. This is misleading, Mr. Speaker. These pipelines aren't designed to replace foreign oil. They're actually not. They're not going to replace oil from Nigeria or Saudi Arabia. This is made for export, Mr. Speaker. There's still not a conversation here that's happening about transition, about energy security, about refining more oil and how we do that while we're in the midst of transition. You know, we've seen what Norway's done. They put $1 trillion in the bank, while Canada put $11 billion in the bank. Where's the trust from the Canadian people that we're investing in assets for future generations? They're earning $50 billion in interest alone, Mr. Speaker, off of their wealth fund. So we know we can do better at managing our resources, more responsible management of our resources, a better way for our future, for our children, in creating jobs, not exporting jobs, but also in just transition that's needed and needed now. The world can't wait, Mr. Speaker, and we have to protect our pristine coastlines and our ecosystems. They're sensitive. They can't afford an oil spill of raw bitumen, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
After question period, the honourable member for Courtenay Alberni there'll be 5 minutes of questions and comments following his speech. Statements by members, déclaration de député, Hull Aylmer.
The Honourable Member for Hull Aylmer. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Last Friday, one of the greatest people in Hull Aylmer left us far too early. Denise Beauchamp, or Mom for her followers, co-owned the Bistrot L'Autreuil in Old Aylmer. Daughter, sister, mother, and spouse from a close-knit family, she welcomed us all with open arms into her clan to celebrate our joy and experience our sorrows. With her presence, she was the soul of the L'Autreuil, and on good days and bad, she made us feel at home. Not only did they helped to restore the Main Street back to its previous glory, she was also very active in the community and brought us together around very important causes. On behalf of the entire community of Hull Aylmer, I offer my sincerest condolences to her family, to her friends, and to the people who had the privilege of spending time with her. Rest in peace, Denise.
I'd like to recognize the honourable member from Souris, Moose Mountain.
Mr. Speaker, recently the member for Yorkton Melville and I met with 160 members of the Shishi Cottage Owners Association and the Grenfell Beach Association. We were there to listen to their concerns about a 9-year process affecting their leases with Her Majesty the Queen in Right of Canada. Many of these 324 leaseholders and their families have invested their life savings into the development of their future, and their leases have been increased 600 to 700%. They are consistently told the issue is before the courts, and there's nothing the government can or will do for them. Decisions made by the court are appealed, remedial resolution meetings are not kept or not made. They are frustrated at every step. In fact, some leases will expire this year. With no written leases presented, how can they determine their future? Like the pipeline, this government continues to kick this process down the road. The government is taking no action to help resolve this issue. The cottagers have not missed payments, and they are reasonable people asking to be treated fairly. It is time for the government to step up and do the right thing.
Member for Winnipeg South.
Mr. Speaker, last week I had the pleasure to travel to Washington, D.C. to celebrate 20 years of leadership by Promundo, a global leader in promoting gender justice and preventing violence by engaging men and boys in partnership with women and girls. I was particularly honored to accept the Future of Manhood Award on behalf of our Prime Minister. L'égalité entre les sexes.
Our government puts gender equality at the heart of decision-making, with new investments to prevent and address gender-based violence and develop an engagement strategy for men and boys that promotes equality.
Mr. Speaker, we simply cannot move forward when half of us are held back. And I'm proud, Mr. Speaker, that our Prime Minister is being recognized for his strong global leadership on gender equality. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear.
The member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue.
Monsieur le Président, il me fait...
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to announce that a parliamentary group has been set up by senators and MPs from all parties to fight modern slavery and human trafficking. I will have the privilege of co-chairing this group alongside the members for Winnipeg Centre and to Peace River Westlock, as well as Senator Christmas. We want to promote a nonpartisan approach because for us the issue is far too important to be bogged down in partisan squabbles. The group is supported by the director of the Centre for International Justice and Human Rights at UBC, Ms. Nicole Barrett, who is member of the national group to end trafficking in women and girls in Canada. Even in our country, some 90% of victims are women exploited above all for sexual purposes. These women are our mothers, our daughters, our sisters, our neighbors, and they deserve our help. I'd like to invite all members in this House to join our group to find solutions to end once and for all these affronts to human rights that occur here in Canada as well.
For St. John Rothsay.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today with a heavy heart, but also one full of pride for the amazing outpouring of community support in response for the historic flooding afflicting the residents of my riding, St. John Rothsay, and all of New Brunswick. There are so many unsung heroes. Our first responders, St. John Energy, our mayors, Don Darling and Nancy Grant, Premier Brian Gallant, and so many others. This is already a record-breaking flood, and thousands of St. John Rothsay residents whose homes have never been at serious risk of flooding in the past are now bearing the brunt of catastrophic flood damage. For me, this flood is personal. One of my best friends, Terry Ferguson, lives at Ground Zero. The effort to save his home is inspiring. People like Kevin Ferguson, Larry Dunlop, Jerry Foley, Sean Ferguson, Mike Gray, Sean Crawford, Chris Ferguson, and so many others have answered the call for help. I urge everyone in my riding to listen closely for and heed advisories issued by EMO officials in the region. Let's stand together, be resilient, and show compassion. I'll be home to help tonight. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Saskatoon University.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take a few moments and speak about an energetic woman named Christina Lee Fast. Christina has a good sense of humor. She likes to seek out the sense of humor in others. Being a sociable person, she has started a young adults group in her church, and that group has grown in time. Christina likes to work out at her local gym. Naturally, her love of fitness led her to become an Olympic athlete in the Special Olympics. Christina loves her life, and the people in her life love her. But not all people in Canada love or even value women like Christina. Why? Because Christina has Down syndrome. Once diagnosed with Down syndrome in the womb, 90% of Down syndrome children in Canada are aborted. Instead of being valued and accepted, sadly they are viewed as a burden to be avoided. Canadians with Down syndrome, Canadians like Christina, make Canada a wonderful place. We should all be proud of their contributions.
The Honourable Member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges. Mr. Speaker, throughout Vaudreuil-Soulanges and throughout the year, there are many activities for families, young people, and seniors in our region. These activities are wonderful, and one of the most exciting is the Des Cèdres River Tour. As part of this activity, a guide will take you on a journey through our history, help you discover the Soulanges Canal, the Cajot, the Prince Rapids ship, and the natural beauty of our region. This river adventure will give you a rare opportunity to see, feel, and experience Vaudreuil-Soulanges as never before. Mr. Speaker, I encourage everyone in Vaudreuil-Soulanges to join me, the Mayor of the Des Cèdres municipality, Mr. Raymond Larouche, and the Municipal Council to participate in the Des Cèdres River Tour.
Honourable Member for London West.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise to acknowledge Beverly Thompson, a London West resident and recipient of the Governor-General's Sovereign Medal for Volunteers. As an official Canadian honour, the Medal for Volunteers recognizes the exceptional volunteer achievements of Canadians from across the country. Beverly Thompson has spent many years helping those suffering from alcohol and drug addiction. She was a founding member of the Westover Treatment Centre in Thamesville and executive director of St. Stephen's, a recovery home for men in London. After decades of devotion to get local and affordable treatment programs in place for people battling alcohol and drug dependency, Bev Thompson is still championing addiction awareness today. Thank you, Beverly, for the lives that you have touched and for all that you have done for Southwestern Ontario. Your selflessness and dedication to service is truly an inspiration. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, April 18th is a date that will remain forever etched in our minds, and more specifically in the minds of people from Charlebourg. The unthinkable occurred. A little girl, Rosalie Gagnon, 2 years of age, was found dead, assassinated, and left in a garbage bin. This little girl suffered tremendously. As a society, it's our duty to protect the most vulnerable members, our seniors and our children. Through this tragic situation, Rosalie brought the community together, Canada and Quebec combined. Everyone came together to offer her a final send-off. Over the past few weeks, a march took place. Balloons were released in Charlebourg in memory of little Rosalie. The funeral will be held tomorrow at the St. Rodrigue Church, and I will attend to honor this little angel. I'm a father. Our children are vulnerable. It's our duty to care for them. They represent our future. Goodbye, Rosalie.
The Honourable Member for Thunder Bay, Rainy River.
Mr. Speaker, today a group of students from Franklin Cromarty High School in Thunder Bay are visiting Parliament Hill. DFC is a unique school that was established by the parents and elders in the Anishinaabe-Aski Nation territory of northwestern Ontario and serves youth from many different nations, First Nations, throughout northwestern Ontario. At Dennis Franklin Cromarty, students have the unique opportunity of attending a First Nation high school within the city of Thunder Bay. The mission of DFC is to ensure students develop a strong sense of identity in the distinct language, culture, and traditions of their communities, while also achieving academic excellence. I want to welcome the students here today, and to them I say miigwech for the work they do.
The Honourable Member for Cloverdale, Langley City.
Mr. Speaker, for anyone who has ever dreamt of starting their own business, they'll want to hear this. The Downtown Langley Business Association is inviting aspiring entrepreneurs across BC to enter a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to win a prize valued at over $100,000 to help them launch the retail business of their dreams in beautiful downtown Langley. The grand prize winner will receive an incredible prize package that includes 6 months free rent, a new retail space, full branding and marketing support, legal and accounting support, and much, much more. Applications are open for one more week and close on May 11th. Interested applicants can visit downtownlangley.com for more information. And while I have you, Mr. Speaker, the Cloverdale Rodeo is coming up from May 18th to 21st. We'll have cowboys and cowgirls competing in a variety of events, the area's largest midway, axe-throwing competitions, rib fest, freestyle skateboarding, and so much more. You won't want to miss it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Albertans are humble, hardworking people. They carry pride that comes from self-reliance, of caring for their community, and for standing for what they believe in. This Liberal government hasn't been kind to my province. Frankly, neither has their current provincial government. But here's the thing. Albertans don't take a punch and stay on the ground. They get up and they punch back. This is why over 2,600 Albertans, an unprecedented number, are gathering this weekend in Red Deer to plan to take their future back. Canadians from around the country congratulate members of the United Conservative Party on the eve of their founding annual general meeting. Their grassroots movement has caught fire across the province and mobilized tens of thousands of people to fight for their right to a prosperous future. To my former colleague Jason Kenney, thank you for what you've done to unite the people of Alberta in this movement. The people of Alberta are strong and they are free. What's happening in Red Deer this weekend will ensure they stay that way. Get her done, Alberta.
The Honourable Member for Vancouver Quadra.
Mr. Speaker, on April 9th, UBC and its partners celebrated the opening of the new Indian Residential School History and Dialogue Centre in my riding of Vancouver Quadra. UBC President Santa Ono took this opportunity to apologize for the university's part in that harmful system. Musqueam First Nation assisted this project of truth sharing, and local elders were present to talk about the long-term impacts of residential schools. The centre provides a place for public education and dialogue on this dark chapter of our history to ensure that the experiences, policies, and abuse will never be forgotten. Our government's comprehensive approach to Indigenous reconciliation is only a small part of our national journey. I commend President Ono and thank the Indian Residential School History and Dialogue Centre Director Link Kessler for his years of championing this project and making it a reality. And finally, thank you to the Musqueam First Nation for inspiring us with your experience and wise counsel.
The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Mr. Speaker, today I want to tell you about a unique service offered in Quebec to the people of Jonquière. An inspiring success story, Jonquière Medic. Since 1982, this organization has offered services for free in-home medical consultations, and to accomplish that, currently 6 doctors are available to meet the needs of the community. Jonquière Medic has proven itself by making it possible to prevent the unnecessary transportation of patients by providing them with the medical treatment they need in their homes. And where does the funding for this organization come from? A service that benefits thousands of people who don't have access to an attending physician? Well, it comes from the community, Mr. Speaker. Annual fundraising events are held and bring in donations from corporations and individuals whose generosity increases each year. I want to salute the extraordinary work by the entire team at Jonquière Medic.
Honourable Member for Carleton.
The Canadian Association for Supportive Employment for the last 20 years has been helping people with disabilities get and keep great jobs. But Annette Burrows, the president of the association, is warning of an obstacle, and I quote, "We strive for employment equality, and when people are faced with any disincentive to be able to contribute to society in a meaningful way through employment, those disincentives need to be addressed and eliminated," end quote. She's referring to the clawbacks and taxes that often mean people with disabilities are worse off when they work, add hours, or get a raise. My bill, the Opportunity for Workers with Disabilities Act, would require governments ensure that people can always get ahead through their own hard work, and I'm happy to announce that Ms. Burrows and her association have endorsed that bill and said, and I quote, "The Opportunity Act would eliminate the disincentive to work due to excess clawbacks on disabled workers. I support its principles. I encourage all members of the House to do the same. Let's pass this bill and bring justice for hardworking Canadians."
Honourable Member for Egmont.
Mr. Speaker, this past week the spring lobster fishery in Prince Edward Island opened, and this also marks the time of year when farmers begin cultivating their land. I would like to take this opportunity to wish all farmers and fishers a safe and productive season and remind Canadians that the hard work of these people is why Canada has a strong reputation for the safest, most abundant food in the world. I would also like to take a moment to recognize one farmer from my riding, Leo Handrahan, who harvested his first blueberries on the family farm near Tignish in 1966. And despite acknowledging that his first crop wasn't much, he persevered, helping re-establish the crop in West Prince. He was recently given the Pioneer Award by the Wild Blueberry Growers Association, which recognizes individuals who have helped build and grow their industry. A well-deserved honor. Congratulations, Leo Handrahan.
Questions orales, oral questions. The Honourable Opposition House Leader.
We've been asking these Liberals about how much their carbon tax will cost Canadians, and for over a year they've been covering up the cost and refusing to answer. But yesterday the Minister of Finance said he's going to tell us in the fall, and he blames the provinces for this cover-up. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, the Finance Minister knows exactly what the carbon tax will cost. He's given us the report, but he's blacked out the numbers. These Liberals need to tell Canadians how much will their carbon tax cost everyday Canadian families.
Honourable Minister of Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was very pleased this week that we released a report, and what did it show? Carbon pricing works. Why? Because it reduces emissions at the lowest cost while also growing the economy.
Provinces, 80% of Canadians live in a province where there's a price on pollution. There is no federal price on pollution. You can go look at British Columbia. British Columbia has been able to reduce its emissions while growing its economy. But what Canadians really want to know is what would the Conservatives do to tackle climate change?
Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Well, Mr. Speaker, high gas prices are not only a burden for Canadian families, but they are a job-killing expense for farmers, fishermen, and business owners. My colleague Rob Moore from New Brunswick has been hearing from fishermen from right across Atlantic Canada. They're really angry about what this government has already done to the lobster and snow crab industries, and now they're very worried about the federal carbon tax and that they won't be able to afford fuel for their fishing vessels. Just how much is this Liberal carbon tax going to cost the good people of New Brunswick? Hear, hear.
Honourable Minister of Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was pleased that I was talking to the Premier of New Brunswick. Provinces across the country understand that we need to put a price on pollution, that we need to have a serious plan to tackle climate change. Provinces are well within their rights to establish their own plan, as 80% of Canadians already live where there's a price: Ontario, Quebec, Alberta, BC. And the provinces can determine what to do with the revenues. They can return the revenues to individuals, to businesses. They can decide they're going to invest in energy efficiency. We think that that's the best way, because that's the way we can actually tackle climate change, work together, and grow our economy.
Honourable Opposition House Leader.
These elitist Liberals are completely out of touch with everyday Canadians. In rural areas and in provinces like New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, driving a vehicle is a necessity. Not using fuel is not an option. In some cases, the closest grocery store, hospital, or bank could be 50 kilometres or more away. Now, jet-setting millionaires like the Prime Minister can afford $1.81 a litre gas prices, but most Canadians can't afford that. So again, when will the Liberals tell us how much their carbon tax is going to cost everyday Canadians?
Honourable Minister of Environment.
I would note that in the past election, every single riding in Atlantic Canada was won by Liberals. I guess that was the message that was missed by the Conservatives. They did nothing. But you know what? The other thing that the Conservatives don't realize, that climate change is real. It's not an elitist view that it's having an impact on farmers. It's having an impact on fishers. It's having an impact on everyone, that we need to take smart, practical measures to tackle climate change. That is exactly what we're doing.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, according to the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report, the carbon tax will have a negative impact on the Canadian economy. A $10 billion impact by 2022. That is a lot of money for Canadian families. How much money is that for families that will be affected by the carbon tax, which is sexist, over the course of a year? Minister of the Environment. Mr. Speaker, I'm very surprised to hear them say that they are afraid of sexism because they closed 12 of 16 status of women offices. We know that we have to act on climate change. We have a plan. What Canadians are asking is, what's the Conservative plan? The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, the sexist carbon tax is only going to be used to pay for Liberals' deficits caused by their bad management. The most vulnerable people will be the ones affected. On this side of the House, we respect the money of Canadians. Why does the Liberal government believe that Canadians' money belongs to them by imposing new taxes to pay their own out-of-control expenditures? The Honourable Minister of the Environment. No matter how loud he yells, it's not going to change anything. I will explain how this is going to work. 90% of Canadians who pay a cost on coal, and the money goes back to the provinces. There are 4 provinces that put a price on carbon, and they have the highest growth in the country. We have to tackle climate change. I ask again, what is your plan for tackling climate change?
I almost always enjoy hearing the voice of the Honourable Member for Souris Moose Mountain. I'd ask him not to yell out when someone else has the floor and to wait until he has the floor. The Honourable Member for Victoria.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 3 weeks ago, just outside these doors, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, well, he suggested the federal government, BC, Alberta, and Indigenous leaders refer the jurisdictional issues concerning Kinder Morgan to the Supreme Court of Canada. Well, the Liberal government scoffed. They said it was a ridiculous proposal. Their jurisdiction was clear and beyond dispute. Now they've decided to join in the reference case to the BC Court of Appeal. Oops, if it was such a ridiculous idea then, why is it such a good idea now?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are intervening in the reference question filed by BC. We are confident in our jurisdiction and will intervene to defend the national interest. The TMX project is of vital strategic interest to Canada, and it will be built. Our government has initiated formal financial discussions with Kinder Morgan, the result of which will be to remove uncertainty overhanging the project. We are also actively pursuing legislative options that will assert and reinforce the federal jurisdiction in this matter, which we know we clearly have. Hundreds of thousands of hardworking Canadians depend on this project being built. Thank you.
Député de Jonquière.
The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Mr. Speaker, almost a month ago, the NDP proposed working with British Columbia, Alberta, and Indigenous communities on a reference to the Supreme Court about Kinder Morgan. The Liberals thought it was ridiculous, but yesterday we found out that they're going to intervene in legal proceedings launched by the government of British Columbia. Not only are they slowing the process down, but they continue to ignore that there's a faster solution. What's the government waiting for to send this file to the Supreme Court? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
We are intervening in the reference question filed by BC. We are doing so because we are confident in our jurisdiction, and we will intervene to defend what is in the national interest. The TMX project is a vital strategic interest to Canada, and it will be built. We are also actively pursuing legislative options that will assert and reinforce the federal jurisdiction in this matter, which we know we clearly have. Our government has also initiated formal financial discussions with Kinder Morgan, the result of which will be to remove uncertainty overhanging this project. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Mr. Speaker, another file, another disagreement with the provinces. Health transfers, Kinder Morgan, price of carbon, taxing cannabis, taxing products online, reopening the Constitution, and I could go on. This time, we're likely to end up in court regarding the authorization to grow cannabis at home. We're far from the leadership and cooperative federalism we had been promised. Will the government stop ignoring the concerns of provinces and finally work with them? The Honourable Minister of Health. The current approach to cannabis isn't working. It allows criminals to profit from it and hasn't kept cannabis out of the hands of our children. We respect the work that the Senate does, and we are looking forward to reviewing the report that is currently being worked on. The government is confident that C-45 will be passed in June. Our government has taken steps to respond to communities, including Indigenous communities.
So much for cooperative federalism in sunny ways, Mr. Speaker. Cooperative federalism, well, that means actually working with the provinces, not simply telling them this is the way things are. Now provinces are raising concerns about home cultivation of marijuana, but the Prime Minister simply says, no way, we're going ahead regardless of your concerns. When did the Liberals decide to abandon cooperative federalism?
Exactly. Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, the approach to cannabis does not work. It has allowed criminals and organized crime to profit while failing to keep cannabis out of the hands of youth. We respect the work that the Senate has been doing, and we look forward to reviewing the recommendations brought forward by the Social Committee. Our government is confident that Bill C-45 can be adopted later this June. Our government has taken important steps to address specific interests expressed by Indigenous communities and other groups. We will continue to collaborate with provinces and territories to ensure that a reasonable transition towards the legal market is brought forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Battleford's Lloydminster.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is ignoring the basic economic reality that his carbon tax unfairly punishes farmers and rural communities. He refuses to accept Saskatchewan's own climate change strategy and continues to threaten my province. Yet, at the same time, he refuses to come clean about the actual cost of his carbon tax on Canadians. If the Prime Minister can't answer this basic question about his carbon tax, Will the Public Safety Minister from Saskatchewan answer this question?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the last election, we campaigned on improving the economy and protecting the environment. We have protecting the environment, and we have the best growth in the G7. We have also not taken science money out of agriculture like the previous Harper government did. We have added $100 million to the science budget in agriculture. We will and will continue, we have and will continue to support the agricultural sector in this country, Mr. Speaker.
Well, member for Saskatoon Grasswood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Liberal carbon tax will have a negative impact on Saskatchewan's export, along with their energy industry's competitiveness. This will be one of the largest national tax increases in Canadian history, and that's why my province is taking it to the Supreme Court. This tax affects everyone, every man, woman, and child in my province. Analysis has been done. The Liberals know the answer, yet they continue to cover it up. So why won't the Public Safety Minister from my province of Saskatchewan come clean and give us the numbers?
Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I think the honourable gentleman missed my speech last year where I described some of these issues in considerable detail before the Canadian Club in a meeting in Regina. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, the province of Saskatchewan has the full option to design a carbon pricing system of its own, including the exemption of farm fuel, including the exemption of small oil and gas companies, if they would choose to do so. If they do not choose to do so, Mr. Speaker, the fallback position will come into effect, but the first right.
The Honourable Member for Souris Moose Mountain.
Mr. Speaker, during the debate on the carbon tax, the Minister of the Environment stated, carbon capture and storage is a solution that will benefit everyone. This technology has existed for years at the Boundary Dam Power Station, whose carbon capture technology has removed over 2 million tons of CO2 from the atmosphere. The Minister sings the virtues of this innovative, green, emissions-cutting technology, yet is forcing job-killing carbon tax on the people of Saskatchewan. Why isn't the only minister from Saskatchewan, the Public Safety Minister, not championing Saskatchewan's clean energy initiatives?
Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Jeepers, Mr. Speaker, he missed the speech too. It specifically dealt with carbon capture and sequestration. And I'm pleased to tell him, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to tell him that I was the minister in the Government of Canada 20 years ago that put the initial funding into carbon capture and sequestration in Saskatchewan.
Order. The Honourable Member for Yorkton Melville.
He should let his Environment Minister know that. Mr. Speaker, the carbon tax is already killing jobs and hurting families in Alberta and British Columbia. Saskatchewan is taking this Liberal Prime Minister and his greedy government to court to stop this punitive tax. In court, the Liberal carbon tax cover-up will be exposed. Why wait until Saskatchewan wins? Will the Minister of the Environment come clean today and reveal the cost of the federal carbon tax on Saskatchewan families? No, she won't. How about the Public Safety Minister, who was elected to represent the beautiful, cutting-edge, environmentally efficient province of Saskatchewan?
The Honourable Minister of Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me be clear. I was actually with Saskatchewan Technology, with carbon capture and storage in Ware, China, so that I could help promote this technology. But let me tell you another thing, but it's going to be hard. You're going to have to stop shouting and listen. That carbon capture and storage is only economic if you put a price on pollution, because people will choose that technology. It is about choice. You know what? There are conservatives that are very happy to explain to you about what a price on pollution works. There are many of them, including the former advisor to Stephen Harper. And I could go, well, maybe you should listen to people that understand economics.
Okay, order. On the one hand, I'd ask members to listen and to not be interrupting when someone else has the floor. On the other, I'd ask the Honourable Minister to remember to address her comments to the Chair. The Honourable Member for North Okanagan, Shuswap.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister lectured Canadians the other day that they need to make better choices and change their behaviour. Well, that behaviour change shouldn't mean missing a health appointment because you can't afford the gas to get there. But that's the choice that some British Columbians are being forced to make with the Prime Minister's punitive carbon taxes. Does the Prime Minister believe that Canadians should be forced to make the choice between driving to a health appointment or paying for groceries?
The Honourable Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker, of course we care about the cost of living for Canadians. Of course we care about growing the economy. Of course we care about tackling climate change. That is why we've got a serious, credible plan with low-cost measures to make sure that we tackle climate change. Once again, all I want to know, and all Canadians want to know, is what would you ever do to tackle climate change, and do you actually believe it's real?
The Honourable Member for Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola.
This government says they care, Mr. Speaker, but, you know, actions speak louder than words. In British Columbia this week, the Prime Minister lectured Canadians that they need to make better choices. Now, what he considers better choices, Mr. Speaker, is devastating to my province. What's worse is they won't tell us, Canadians or their representatives in this place, how much it will cost. We're already starting to see the cost, with gas at $1.60 a litre, Mr. Speaker. And, of course, the Prime Minister and his cabinet won't feel the effects of everyday families are feeling because they get paid, everything is paid for. When will they come clean, Mr. Speaker, and tell Canadians what their carbon tax will cost them?
Honourable Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker, we have been clear with Canadians. We released a study this week, and what does it show? It shows that putting a price on pollution works. Why does it work? Because it creates incentives for people to choose low-cost options. It creates incentives to choose innovation, creates incentives to reduce emissions and tackle climate change. But once again, we're just going to continue asking, what is the Conservative plan to tackle climate change, and do they believe it's real?
L'Honorable Député de Sherbrooke.
The Honourable Member for Sherbrooke. 2 years ago, we found out that the CRA wrote up an amnesty letter to rich clients for KPMG. The Minister for Revenue indicated that justice would be done, that no one is above the law. Since then, nothing. No criminal charges against KPMG or its clients. But when it's time to attack single moms who depend on the Canada Child Benefit, she's quick to act. Why is she so slow when it comes time to prosecute real fraudsters like KPMG and its clients?
Revenue.
Mr. Speaker, cracking down on tax evasion, especially offshore, is a priority for our government. Budget 2018 invests almost $100 million into the CRA, in addition to nearly $1 billion in the last two budgets to allow us to go even further in this fight. The budget also includes legislative changes that will close tax loopholes used by multinationals. We have fully adopted the international standard for the automatic exchange of information with our OECD partners, and starting this year, Mr. Speaker, we will have access to even more data from other jurisdictions, which will enable us to fight tax evasion even more effectively. Thank you.
Député de Longueuil.
The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. The Quebec Union of Municipalities is seeing the damage caused by federal inaction when it comes to taxing web giants. Again this week, the Minister of Finance got mixed up. We asked about GST, and he answered by talking about corporate taxes. This is concerning. People and businesses here are struggling, and the government continues to give preferential treatment to multinationals. Everyone should pay their fair share. That's just good common sense. Look, is this like the pot issue? Do the Liberals have little buddies to protect? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To answer the question, no, we have no friends to protect. Our approach is careful and responsible. We want an approach to taxing web giants that will preserve the economy, will encourage innovation, and making sure that everything is fair at the same time. That's why the Minister of Finance is working with his OECD partners to make sure that Canada takes an approach that is concerted at an international level.
In May 2016, at a G7 ministers meeting, the Environment Minister, according to an article in the Globe and Mail, quote, advocated for greater recognition of the gender dimension to climate. However, a subsequent gender-based analysis on the Prime Minister's carbon tax suggested that it could have a lopsided negative impact for different genders. Why is the Prime Minister not taking his own minister's advice and refusing to recognize the gender dimension to the carbon tax.
The Minister of Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased that the member opposite has raised the importance of doing gender-based analysis. We are committed to doing that. And in the second annex to the release that we put out to the report we put out this week, it talks about the gender-based analysis. We think provinces, who are the ones who are putting the price on pollution, they should take into account the impacts of putting a price on pollution to everyone, to women, to marginalized groups, and they can do that through rebates and through other means. But it's very good that we're having this discussion in the House of Commons and actually looking at the impact of policies, including on women.
Well, member for Calgary Nose Hill.
So now it's the province's responsibility to implement the intersectional gender-based sexist carbon tax? Look, I support asking questions on whether or not new policies, like new taxes, create barriers to equal opportunity. So, in that spirit, why is this Prime Minister set on implementing or forcing the provinces to implement a new tax that his own intersectional gender lens, gender-based analysis, says can make life harder for women?
Of Environment.
The purpose of doing a gender-based analysis is basically every policy can have a disproportionate impact on different groups. So we actually did this. I would encourage the member opposite to review Schedule 2 to the report. Yes, provinces are the ones who are putting a price on pollution. In fact, 80% of Canadians live in a province where they put a price on pollution. Provinces have the opportunity to take the revenues and to give them back to people. They can give money back to women. They can give money back to disadvantaged groups. They can give money back to farmers. It is up to provinces. We are giving them the tools and the information they need.
L'honorable député de Charles.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, yesterday I asked the Minister a question, but I don't think he understood. I'll restart. In 2010, the Harper government appointed a special advisor to the Privy Council office for matters dealing with human trafficking and illegal migration, but this advisor retired in 2016. Since then, the position has remained unfilled. My question's not about the G7 and the topics to be raised there. I'm asking, when can we expect this position filled again?
Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, we have taken a broader approach. We have, in fact, embedded these issues with respect to human trafficking in a broad range of federal government policies at the G7, but beyond the G7. Indeed, in the last budget, one very useful initiative that had been asked for a very long time by a variety of women's organizations, the establishment of a national hotline for dealing with human trafficking. We are proceeding step by step by step on an effective plan to deal with human trafficking, and it's proving to be effective.
Député de Charles.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. We'll come back to it next week because I want to know if someone is going to take the place of that former official. Now, Mr. Speaker, we found out that officials from the Canadian government went to Nigeria to discuss the visa process with the Americans. It's clear that Nigerians continue to receive these visas and enter Canada illegally. Knowing that they obtain visas only to enter Canada illegally, it's clear that the Prime Minister is finally realizing that there's a problem at the border. Is the Prime Minister ready to set up a system to have them immediately deported? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. To the Minister of Immigration. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you know, our government is committed to protecting the security and safety of Canadians and at the border. We've invested a great deal in the last budget to process claims, contrary to the previous government that cut into border services. I can tell you that we are certainly discussing things with our American counterparts, and when it comes to the Nigerian community crossing at the border, we will continue to work with our American counterparts, and there have been real steps taken on that situation.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Mr. Speaker, the end of terrestrial television is having an impact on my region. Not only is there no longer a regional news show on Radio-Canada, but everyone who used to watch that channel via terrestrial television has lost access to it unless they're willing to pay for cable or satellite TV. This is happening in rural areas all across Canada. Mr. Speaker, can the Minister of Heritage tell us her position on the phasing out of terrestrial television in rural Canada. The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of course, we believe in the importance of our public broadcaster, and that's why we've invested over $600 million in Radio-Canada and CBC to ensure that we have good local journalism, and also that we can gradually shift to other platforms as well. I understand the issues here, but this is managed by the CRTC, which is independent of the government. Furthermore, when it comes to telecommunications infrastructure, we invested $500 million to ensure that we would have broadband internet all across the regions of Quebec and Canada. The Honourable Member for Drummond. Mr. Speaker, obvious French grammar mistakes continue to be found on government websites, and this problem seems to be getting worse. This time, it's the Parks Canada and Revenue Canada websites, which are full of poor translations. An example, well, imagine you want to go to the park this year. The opening hours are listed as July 1st to 7th the 4th. It's appalling. The French language is not the language of Google Translate. It's an official language and needs to be respected. The Minister of Public Services and Procurement had promised to fix the problem, so what is she waiting for? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, of course we are committed to restore the important role of the Translation Bureau. We've made significant investments in the Translation Bureau, and we have appointed a we've appointed a quality control CEO, and we have worked with academic students and others to ensure that there are sufficient translators to take over. Of course, French or English language mistakes on government websites are unacceptable. We are committed to fixing them, and that's what we're doing.
Etobicoke Lakeshore.
Mr. Speaker, Portugal was one of the very first countries to ratify CETA agreement last November. CETA was an important step in our bilateral relations, providing great opportunities for businesses and workers in both countries. This morning, as part of the state visit, our Prime Minister and the Portuguese Prime Minister are attending the Economic Club of Canada Summit entitled Canada-Portugal Economic Relations, Maximizing the Benefits of CETA. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Trade tell us a little bit more about the benefits of CETA for our two great countries? Obrigado, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I would like to thank the member from Etobicoke Lakeshore for his great question. Canada and Portugal are long-standing friends and allies and important commercial partners, and CETA marks an important new chapter in our relationship. With the increased market access from CETA, our exports to Portugal have already increased by over 40%. We are very grateful for the support and leadership Portugal has shown. With CETA, Canadian companies, especially in sectors like oilseeds, aircraft, and cereals, are benefiting. Mr. Speaker, this historic progressive trade agreement is creating opportunity for the middle class today.
Honourable Member for Barrie Innisfil.
Well, when it comes to the issue of electoral reform, Canadians shouldn't have an ounce of trust in Liberals doing the right thing. Anyone remember that 2015 was going to be the last election under first past the post? Well, that lasted about a year or so until Canadians realized the Liberals were trying to rig the election system in their favour. Mr. Speaker, why is it every time that the Liberal Party wants to change things for the better, it ends up being better for them?
Here, here.
The Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Democratic Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, we're committed to strengthening Canada's democratic institutions and increasing Canada's trust and participation in our democratic processes. C-76 is a great example of that. This bill will increase the transparency of our electoral process. It will make elections more accessible to all Canadians. It will make the electoral process more secure and ensure political parties protect Canadians' privacy. We believe that a whole-of-government approach is required to protect Canada's democratic institutions, and we look forward to working with all members in the House to build a more open and transparent system for Canada.
For Barrie Innisfil.
Well, last election, nearly 1 million incorrect voter information cards were mailed out. The Liberals now want those to be used as proof of address. Outside foreign influencers funneled millions of dollars into Canada last election and as an assault on our democracy. They've left the door open for the same thing to happen in 2019. Liberal operatives can organize to verbally vouch for individuals with no ID and allow their vote to count. Mr. Speaker, why is the Prime Minister ripping democracy out of the hands of Canadians and giving it to foreigners and Liberal operatives?
Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, the main challenge for our electoral democracy isn't voter fraud, but voter participation. Eliminating the voter ID card does not improve the integrity of the system. It only takes away the ability of many qualified voters to vote. In Bill C-76, we're not only restoring the use of voter identification cards and vouching, but we're also giving back the mandate for Elections Canada to promote participation. The Conservative Party's so-called Fair Elections Act was simply cover for a government determined to wring political gain from every measure. Mr. Speaker, we'll take no lessons from the party opposite. We believe Canadians have a right to vote, and that's what we'll continue to fight for.
Honourable Member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Speaker, we know that the Liberal carbon tax will raise fuel costs by over 10 cents per litre. For a farmer in Kitchener-Conestoga, that means an additional $6,000 a year just for this carbon tax. Add to that the cost of getting his feed to his farm and getting his milk to market. These costs will be devastating. Mr. Speaker, why is the Liberal government patting their books on the back of the farmers in my riding of Kitchener-Conestoga?
Honourable Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker, I want to be very clear to Canadians that we have committed that all revenues will be returned to the province. And in the province of Ontario, there is a price on pollution, as there is in Alberta, BC, Ontario, Quebec. 80% of Canadians live in a jurisdiction where there's a price on pollution, and guess what? They're the fastest growing economies in the country while reducing our emissions. Isn't that what we should all want? Shouldn't we all want that we tackle climate change for our kids, that we should also grow our economy and create jobs? And I wish the party opposite would understand you can do both.
Honourable Member for Medicine Hat, Cardston Warner.
Mr. Speaker, communities in New Brunswick are currently experiencing record flooding, with water levels expected to continue to rise in southern regions of the province over the coming days. Families along the St. John River have been forced to leave their homes, and dozens of roads have been closed, leaving others cut off and in need of assistance. Now, my question, Mr. Speaker, is to the Minister of Public Safety, and I don't want him to blow another gasket with this question. Will you please update this House, sir, on what the government measures will be to assist those affected with the New Brunswick flooding?
While I appreciate the honourable member for Medicine Hat, Cardston Warner, was polite in saying sir, I suppose, but he shouldn't be saying you, of course, unless he's referring to the Speaker. We address the Chair, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, to the Minister of Fisheries.
Mr. Speaker, our thoughts are with the people affected by flooding and with the first responders who are working hard to keep them safe. Initial estimates of damages are in the $24 million range. However, this could increase should the water hit forecasted levels in the upcoming days. I'm happy to report to the House that since being asked, the Canadian Coast Guard has actually worked throughout the night to help people in this horrible situation. Our government always stands ready to help the province or territory requesting federal assistance in response to natural disasters, including flooding. The Prime Minister has also offered to provide military assistance to the province if they request it.
Honourable member for Saskatoon West.
Mr. Speaker, it's been 1 year since STC was shut down, and the people of Saskatchewan are still without access to safe, affordable public transportation. After saying they would work with me to address this issue in a meaningful way, the silence from this government is deafening. I hope the minister was sincere when he said he would work with me. When will the minister break the silence and get to work and find solutions for the public transit crisis in Saskatchewan?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Transport.
I'd like to thank the honourable member for her question. We understand that having an efficient and functional transportation system is absolutely critical. We need to work together. We have to work together with the provinces and with the municipalities in order to make that happen, and those kind of discussions are underway. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Desnethi, Missinippi, Churchill
Mr.
River.
Speaker, perhaps the minister doesn't understand that there is no public transportation in northern Saskatchewan. This means that many women, seniors, and residents, including First Nations and Métis, cannot safely get to medical appointments or other critical services. Some can't even get to a grocery store. This is unacceptable. When will the minister start working with First Nations, Métis, and rural communities to provide them with safe transit?
The Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member knows, of course, that the decision to cancel the Saskatchewan Transportation Company and to eliminate that service across Saskatchewan was a decision taken by the provincial government. The federal government has infrastructure programming available to support transit services and facilities. The Government of Canada does not actually operate the bus system. but the Government of Canada can invest in the physical assets that are required to support the bus system. There would need to be a proponent in Saskatchewan willing to bring forward that proposition.
Honourable member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Mr. Speaker, my palliative care bill passed into law last year. As part of that law, the health minister is required to meet with the provinces to determine the services to be covered, appropriate training for the different levels of service provision, and to get input on a plan to get consistent access to palliative care for all Canadians. Since the law passed, the term palliative care was removed from the 2018 budget. So why is the minister dragging her feet on this very important issue?
The Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we recognize that Canadians want to stay independent as long as possible, and if they need services, they want to receive them within their home. In addition to the Canada Health transfer payments, we've invested more than $6 billion to provinces and territories to ensure that better home care and palliative care services are in place. We recently announced $6 million to Pallium Canada to increase capacity to deliver palliative care to communities. And also, I look forward to working with provinces and territories as we move forward in the implementation of Bill C-277, as we certainly want to make sure that the provisions of the bill are put in place. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Kamloops Thompson Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, after lengthy court battles, Charmaine Stick finally won the right to see her band's financial information, Onion Creek. The vast majority of bands publish this information freely. However, this government has enabled the rest to hide their books. As Charmaine said, quote, now that we have the numbers, our leaders are going to have to start answering tough questions. That's what it should be, communities that are empowered. Why is this government continuing to be complicit in this cover-up?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, everyone, including First Nation governments, support transparency and accountability. We held 27 engagement sessions from coast to coast and heard clearly from First Nations that top-down solutions do not work. We are moving forward with the co-development of a mutual accountability framework, which was a recommendation from the new fiscal relationship report that was developed with AFN. Mutual transparency and accountability will only be improved by working in true partnership with First Nations.
Honourable Member for Beauport, Limoilou. Mr. Speaker, on April 6th, the Ministers for Finance, International Trade, and Families, Children and Social Development visited the Port of Quebec. I was very pleased about that because since 2015, port authorities there have been working on a huge economic project for this region called Beauport 2020. For 3 years now, the Liberal government has been dragging its feet when it comes to approving this project or disbursing the $60 million that had been earmarked for this project by the previous Conservative government. So I would like the Minister to tell me, did you discuss Beauport 2020 with the port authorities, and what was the nature of those discussions? Thank you. I would remind the member to direct his comments through the chair. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Transport.
Member for the question. I do not have the specific answer of that particular project, but I know that the minister, if you would give me a minute, the minister has been in contact. There is a port authority review that is ongoing at the present time, so I know the minister is very involved in this discussion as we move forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member knows that I will give members 35 seconds and not give them a minute, but I don't think she was actually meaning to talk to me when she said you, which she ought to be doing is she's using the word you, so I'd ask her to direct her comments to the chair. The honourable member for New Brunswick Southwest.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The flooding in New Brunswick is unprecedented. This week, I've been very involved, as always, talking with my constituents, but also the Minister of Fisheries, EMO officials, mayors, and volunteers about this flooding. Would the Minister please inform this House how our government will help New Brunswickers in my riding of New Brunswick Southwest impacted by this unprecedented flooding? Thank you.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to start by thanking the honourable member from New Brunswick Southwest for an important question. Our thoughts are with the people of New Brunswick, and we offer all support that we can during this challenging time. That's why yesterday, at the request of the government of New Brunswick, the Canadian Coast Guard committed to assisting the flood relief effort across the province. In addition to boats and personnel, the Coast Guard will help residents safeguard their homes against potential damage. The safety and security of New Brunswickers is a priority for our government, in fact, all members of this House, and we are committed to doing everything we can to support New Brunswickers during this difficult time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well done.
L'honorable député de Montmagny.
The Honourable Member for Montmagny, Lille, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister said during the election campaign that his budget would balance itself. Once they came to power, the Minister of National Revenue thought that giving $1 billion to public servants would help recover $25 billion, but that didn't happen. But a Nova Scotia sculptor named Steve Higgins has been hit with a $14,000 bill because the CRA considers his work to be just a hobby. After targeting single mothers and people with disabilities, why are the Liberals now trying to balance the budget on the backs of honest citizens like Mr. Higgins?
National Revenue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Canadian artists are among the most talented in the world, and we will work with our art partners to support them in their work. As my colleague opposite knows very well, I cannot comment on specific cases. The rules surrounding what is considered a hobby or a business are defined in the Income Tax Act, the test for which has been defined by the Supreme Court in 2002. We are committed to working with artists and stakeholders from the arts community to ensure that they have the tools and information needed to understand their tax obligations. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Châteauguay-Lacolle. Mr. Speaker, we live in a world where women living in poverty must face shocking inequalities from cradle to grave. Access to education, jobs, property, responsibilities. Women are far from enjoying the same advantages as men. Can the Minister of International Development and the Francophonie tell this House how our feminist international assistance policy is making a difference for women in developing countries? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my colleague for Châteauguay-Lacolle for her support of women's issues. With our feminist assistance policy, we are helping to end poverty and support women and girls by supporting local organizations, by funding education, and by reducing the barriers that are preventing teenagers from going to school. We want to give them access to all sexual and reproductive healthcare services and putting women and girls to work. That will make our world fairer and more inclusive.
Niagara West.
Mr. Speaker, Canadian companies are waiting on this Liberal government to do something on TPP. They know that being one of the first of the agreement will give them a head start on selling their high-quality products to a market of 500 million consumers. The Prime Minister has given no timeline on the ratification. Mr. Speaker, could the Liberals tell us when we will see legislation so that Canadian companies can start taking advantage of this great Conservative negotiated agreement?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Trade.
Bien sûr, la ratification.
Of course, the ratification of the TPP is a priority for our government. The Minister was very pleased to sign the agreement on March 8th. Now that it's been signed, every member country will commence their own ratification and implementation processes. As you know, this must go through the normal legislative process before being ratified. I'm looking forward to working with my dear colleague on this legislative project.
Member for Central Nova.
Monsieur le Président, plutôt...
Mr. Speaker, earlier this year, the Prime Minister, as Minister of Youth, launched a study on youth in Canada.
Update this House on the progress of the youth policy and how other young people can get involved.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my honourable colleague from Central Nova for his very important question. As you know, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister firmly believes that youth are not just leaders of tomorrow, but they're the leaders of today. And that's why the for youth, by youth approach that we've taken to the creation of the first ever youth policy for Canada is proof of just that. And we've had an opportunity to speak with thousands of youth from all across the country about the issues that matter most to them, Mr. Speaker, but we always want to reach out to more. Et c'est pour cette raison, Monsieur le Président.
And that's why, Mr. Speaker, I encourage all members of this House to encourage young people in their ridings to visit the website youthaction.ca to give their feedback.
Joliet.
Honourable Member for Joliet. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Competition Bureau spoke to the media and responded to our request for an investigation into gas price fixing. They talked about a plot and asked Canadians to send them evidence. Mr. Speaker, when the authorities start asking for the public's help, it's clear that we need a real investigation. Yesterday, the Parliamentary Secretary said that he would just monitor the situation, while we are asking the Minister to just do his job and order an investigation. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague for his question. The price of gas is a concern for me and for all Canadians. We are determined to ensure that the price that consumers pay is the result of a fair competitive market. When the Competition Bureau notices such behavior that goes against the Competition Act, they do not hesitate to take action to protect consumers. Mr. Speaker, the Competition Bureau, as an independent organization, ensures that consumers can prosper in a competitive market. The Honourable Member for Joliette. Only the minister has the power to order an investigation, and that's what we're calling on him to do. Oil executives aren't worried that the price of gas will ruin their holiday this summer. Quite the contrary. Esso's profits grew 55% year over year. Valero, 27%. Suncor, 22%. Meanwhile, and just in time for Saint-Jean-Baptiste Day, Quebecers will again be facing a bad surprise at the pumps. So I call the government to side with ordinary people for once instead of the oil companies. Is that too much to ask? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government does not have jurisdiction directly over gas prices. Only the provinces and territories have that authority. The Competition Bureau will take steps if there is proof of anti-competitive behavior. Following an investigation, 15 companies and several individuals were accused in the past of having participated in a gas price fixing plot in 4 regions of Quebec. Some of them have pled guilty or have been convicted and have been fined. The Honourable Member for Repentigny. The Prime Minister didn't care at all about Quebec's opinion about legalizing cannabis. Nor did the Prime Minister care about imposing a date for implementing new home-growing rules. Mr. Speaker, the same goes for health transfers, Netflix privileges, tax havens, and so much more. In the end, open federalism just means that Quebec has to bend to the will of the Prime Minister. Will his answer to Quebec's requests always be fuddle-duddle? The Honourable Minister of Health. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The health and safety of Canadians is a priority for our government. Cannabis sold today is not regulated, it's not tested, and it's often very dangerous. Bill C-45 will create a regulated market for all Canadians. We are taking the time to do this properly so that profits do not go to crime and our youth are protected. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Tabling of documents. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to Standing Order 36, Bracket 8, I have the honour to table in both official languages the government's responses to 19 petitions.
Dépôt de projet de loi et mandat de gouvernement.
Introduction of government bills.
Déclaration.
Statements by ministers.
Rapport de délégation.
Reports from interparliamentary delegations.
Reports from committees. The Honourable Member for Hamilton West and Castor Dundas. Order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to Standing Order 104 and 114, I have the honour to present in both official languages the 61st report of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs regarding the membership of committees of the House. If the House gives its consent, I intend to move concurrence in the 61st report later today.
The Honourable Member for Etobicoke Lakeshore.
Speaker, I have the honour to present in both official languages the 9th report of the Standing Committee on Natural Resources entitled Value-Added Products in Canada Forest Sector, Cultivating Innovation for a Competitive Bioeconomy. Pursuant to Standing Order 109, the committee requests that the government table a comprehensive response to this report. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Introduction of private members' bills. First reading of Senate public bills. Motions. The Honourable Member for Hamilton West and Castor Dundas.
Mr. Speaker, if the House gives its consent, I move that the 61st report of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs presented to the House earlier today be concurred in.
The Honourable Member have the unanimous consent of the House to oppose the motion. Agreed. The House has heard the terms of the motion. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Carried. Presenting petitions, présentation de pétitions. The Honourable Member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a petition here from my riding talking about the Canada Summer Jobs Program and calling on the Prime Minister to defend the freedoms of conscience, thought and belief by withdrawing the attestation requirement for applicants to the Canada Summer Jobs Program. It's the duty of the Government of Canada to defend the rights of all Canadians, regardless of whether the current Liberal government agrees with their specific views. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Député de Jonquière.
The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have the honour to rise today to present a petition signed by people from Jonquière dealing with the GIS. The federal government recently announced a process for automatic registry for seniors for the supplement, but it will not apply to all eligible people when they turn 64. The program is important and enables seniors who receive old age security and who have a low income to count on this additional income and to remain in their homes and to benefit from more services they need. That's why this petition is so important. It deals with the guaranteed income supplement. I would remind honourable members that in presenting petitions, whether they are not to speak to whether they are in favour or against, they are just to present a petition.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 36, I rise today to table a petition regarding the former Bill C-51. Although the petitioners are from Southern Ontario and not from my immediate riding of Ottawa South, I am tabling this petition on their behalf. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for North Okanagan, Shuswap.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to present a petition today received from members of the North Okanagan, Shuswap, and also across BC, asking that the petitioners call upon Parliament to remove the condition of employers to attest to respecting reproductive rights of abortion within the Canada Summer Jobs Program. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Courtenay Alberni.
Sure. I'm rising again to table a petition on behalf of constituents from coastal British Columbia calling on the government to develop a national strategy to combat plastics entering our waterways. The petitioners are calling on the government to put forward a strategy to regulate single-use plastics, stormwater outfalls and microplastic pollution, a national strategy to clean up derelict and ghost fishing gear, extend producer responsibility, funding for education, outreach, and beach cleanups, and of course, Mr. Speaker, to address the root problem, redesigning the plastic economy.
The Honourable Member for Pontiac. Mr. Speaker, I have the honour to present a petition to the House today for constituents interested in protecting the Gatineau Park. The Gatineau Park is one of the most visited parks in the country. There are some 90 plant species, 50 species of animals. The limits of the park aren't acknowledged under federal legislation, so the petitioners are urging the House of Commons to adopt legislation to give the park the necessary protection for future generations.
This petition on their behalf. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Niagara West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have two different sets of petitions here, all from my riding. It says, we, the undersigned citizens of the residents of Canada, draw the attention of the Right Honourable Prime Minister to the following. Section 2 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms identifying, among other things, freedom of conscience, freedom of thought, and freedom of belief as fundamental freedoms. And it goes on to ask them to look at the Canada Summer Jobs Program as it relates to freedoms of conscience, thought, and belief. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member for Niagara West made a good catch. The Honourable Member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Because of the risk to sport fishing, to tourism, the risk of an oil spill on sensitive shoreline, particularly on Sandwell Provincial Park and Whalebone Beach, which is in Nanaimo territory, I commend to this House yet more petitions opposed to the establishment of 5 new bulk anchorages off Gabriola Island, which is also my home. Petitioners from Calgary, Surrey, Red Deer, Gabriola Island, the province of Quebec, across the country, urging the Transport Minister to cancel the bulk anchorages establishment at a time of unprecedented new anchorage traffic from these huge ships in the Salish Sea. We do not want to add to more of the risk and more of the load. Thank you.
Battleford Lloydminster.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to table a petition signed by my constituents in Battleford-Lloydminster who feel that their Canadian Charter rights have been breached. The petitioners are calling upon the Prime Minister to withdraw the discriminatory attestation requirement from the Canada Summer Jobs Program. They want the Prime Minister to defend and respect their fundamental freedoms of conscience, thought, and belief. Thank you.
Drummond.
The Honourable Member for Drummond. Mr. Speaker, I have the honour to table today a petition, an electronic petition with some 1,400 signatories, confirming that whereas free society is important, we, the undersigned, residents of Canada, urge the government to, number one, exempt books from the GST, restore a postal tariff for books, and 3, establish a personal tax credit applicable to the purchasing of books.
Honourable Member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have a petition signed by many residents of Kitchener-Conestoga and the surrounding regions in the Waterloo region. They point out that the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms identifies freedom of conscience, freedom of thought, and freedom of belief as fundamental freedoms, and they're calling on the House of Commons to defend the freedoms of conscience, thought, and belief, and withdraw the attestation requirement for applicants to the Canada Summer Jobs Program. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honour to rise this afternoon to present a petition from residents throughout Saanich Gulf Islands calling on the government to protect the coast of British Columbia, not just the north coast. The petitioners call on the House of Commons to establish a permanent ban on crude oil tankers on the west coast of Canada to protect British Columbia's fisheries, tourism, coastal communities, and natural ecosystems along the entire coast. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Yorkton Melville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for saving the best till last. I have 3 separate petitions to present today on behalf of the wonderful constituents of Yorkton Melville. The first one, they want to draw to the House's attention that the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms identifies, among other things, freedom of conscience, freedom of thought, and freedom of belief as fundamental freedoms, and therefore they are calling upon this Prime Minister to defend the freedoms of conscience, thought, and belief, and withdraw the attestation requirement for applications to the Canada Summer Jobs Program. Secondly, I have a petition here from members of my riding as well as across Saskatchewan and Manitoba in regards to Bill C-71. They feel that this does nothing to tackle firearms violence, but rather adds further red tape to law-abiding gun owners and brings back the useless and ineffective long gun registry. It does not provide the resources to frontline police forces to tackle the true source of firearms violence, gangs, and organized criminals. So we, the undersigned residents of Canada, call upon the House of Commons to scrap Bill C-71 and act to amend certain acts and regulations in relation to firearms and to instead devote greater resources to policing in Canada. And finally, Mr. Speaker, these individuals indicate that a CBC documentary revealed that ultrasounds are being used in Canada to tell the sex of an unborn child so that expectant parents can choose to terminate the pregnancy if the unborn child is a girl. An Environics poll found that 92% of Canadians believe sex-selected pregnancy termination should be illegal. And the Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists of Canada and the Canadian Association of Radiologists strongly oppose the non-medical use of fetal ultrasounds. These over 200 million girls are missing worldwide because of this practice, and the 3 deadliest words in the world are "it's a girl." Therefore, we, the undersigned, call upon the Canadian Parliament to condemn the discrimination against girls occurring through sex-selected pregnancy termination. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any petitions, présentation de pétitions, questions on the order paper. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If a supplementary response to question 1564, originally tabled on May 3, 2018, and the government's responses to question 1568 to question 1583 could be made orders for return, these returns would be tabled immediately.
Pleasure of the House that the aforementioned questions be made orders for return, that they be tabled immediately. Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Then furthermore, Mr. Speaker, I'd ask that all remaining questions be allowed to stand at this time, please.
Is it agreed? Agreed and so ordered. Ordre du jour.
Orders of the day, government bills, comments.
Of Bill C-48, the Oil Tanker Moratorium Act.
And now we're on to 5 minutes of questions and comments following the speech of the Honourable Member for Courtenay Alberni. Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
So thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's just to reinforce how important it is in terms of that there was a commitment that was made by the Prime Minister in the lead up to the election in terms of having a moratorium put into place. This legislation fulfills that particular commitment. But the government as a whole in dealing with our natural resources and working with many different stakeholders, Indigenous people to provincial entities, has recognized how important it is that we move forward in terms of both economic development at the same time ensuring the interests of our environment. And my question to the member would the person not at the very least acknowledge that we can in fact do both at the same time, and that is indeed in the national interest.
We absolutely can. In fact, we're doing that right now where we live in coastal British Columbia. We have 100,000 jobs that are in tourism, that rely on clean oceans, that rely on a healthy environment. We as New Democrats, would like to see a transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. We wished that this government would have pursued those same ambitious goals that they talked about in 2015 in their campaign. But, Madam Speaker, when we look at this bill, and I'll speak to that, the Prime Minister made a commitment. Crude oil supertankers just have no place on BC's north coast. I couldn't agree more. But, Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister seems to believe that they belong on BC's south coast. And there's no wall. There's no wall between the north coast and the south coast. The water doesn't go through a filter, anything like that. Our tides move. Our currents move. The wind moves water. Water moves. Our fish move. They migrate from the north to the south. Our whales migrate from the north to the south. There is no wall between the north and the south coast. We need to protect our coast. So I wish this legislation expanded beyond the north coast and included the south coast, and was bold to protect coastal waters. There was an oil spill, Madam Speaker, off of the coast of Washington State, and that oil spill ended up on the west coast of Vancouver Island. That's how far it traveled. This is a small oil spill. So when we talk about the environment and the economy, yes, we can do both, but we don't need super tankers moving crude oil to protect the environment and grow the economy.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Cowichan, Malahat, Langford.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I really appreciate my colleague from Courtenay Alberni and his speech. He really is a strong defender, not only for his riding, but really for what we on coastal British Columbia feel. You know, it's really odd being in this House because we have the Conservatives and the Liberals both trying to out-pipeline each other. And here we are standing in the face of stark evidence of what climate change is currently doing to our planet and what it's about to do. And we acknowledge that there are economic opportunities in moving towards a just transition. I know my colleague talked about that, but I just really want him to highlight, when we're talking about the national interest, can he just really emphasize what our coastal economy is really based on and what the potential is for the future when we take that forward-looking view, bringing in First Nations, bringing in economic tourism, the sport fishing, wrapping that up all together for a really clear vision of what we want to see on the coast going on through this century.
Member for Courtenay Alberni.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I belong to a Chamber of Commerce that went from 160 members to 330 members. I belonged to a Chamber of Commerce that did that. And in fact, I was the executive director of that Chamber of Commerce for 5 years. So I watched the economy grow, and that economy grew with really great foundational principles of a community that was had core values that were based on protection of the environment while growing the economy and working with reconciliation. These jobs rely on a clean environment. And when we think about our oceans and the national interest, it's in the national interest that we have a clean, healthy ocean. Whether you live in Regina or Newfoundland, and trust me, Madam Speaker, we have had people come and move to our community from every province in this country and work in our communities and enjoy the beautiful environment we have. And most of those people, not just most, almost all of them, will tell you, after leaving a place like Tofino, that we shouldn't be increasing tanker traffic on the coast of British Columbia, Madam Speaker, and that's in our national interest. Protecting our economy, growing a sustainable, healthy economy, a marine-based economy that relies on clean ecosystems, sensitive ecosystems.
Resuming debate, the member for Cloverdale-Langley City.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity today to join in the discussion about Bill C-48 and the important role that it will play in the protection of the province that I represent in British Columbia. Bill C-48, an act to establish an oil tanker moratorium on British Columbia's north coast, is a significant step that we're taking to enhance environmental protections for our coastlines. Preventing accidents from occurring in the first place is our primary goal. This measure, which complements the $1.5 billion Oceans Protection Plan, takes a precautionary approach to help safeguard the extremely ecologically sensitive marine environment in this region. The BC oil tanker moratorium will build on the existing voluntary tanker exclusion zone, which has been in effect since 1985. The voluntary tanker exclusion zone ensures that loaded tankers carrying oil from Valdez, Alaska to U.S. West Coast ports transit west of the tanker exclusion zone boundary to protect our shoreline. By formalizing an oil tanker moratorium, this legislation will prohibit tankers carrying large shipments of crude or persistent oils from stopping, loading, and unloading at ports and marine installations in northern British Columbia. The moratorium area will extend from the Canada-U.S. border in the north down to the point on British Columbia's mainland adjacent to the northern tip of Vancouver Island, and also includes the beautiful islands that are Haida Gwaii. The legislation also includes strong penalty provisions for contravention that could reach up to $5 million. This will help keep our waters and coasts safe and clean for use today while protecting them for future generations. Mr. Speaker, through this legislation, we will put in place unprecedented levels of environmental protections for the marine environment in northern British Columbia. The precautionary approach taken in Bill C-48 targets both crude oil and persistent oil products that are likely to remain longest in the environment if spilled. Under the Act, the Governor and Council will have authority to amend the schedule of prohibited persistent oil products. Amendments to the schedule would be done via regulation and could be considered following a review that would assess new science and evidence around the fate and behavior of the petroleum product when spilled, advances in cleanup technology, and institutional arrangements for responding to vessel source oil spills. Indeed, environmental safety and science will be the main considerations for adding products to the schedule or removing products from it. During consultations and witness statements, we heard about the importance of environmental protections in this region. Coastal communities and industries rely on healthy ecosystems to protect their way of life and livelihoods, for example, through fish populations that could become threatened should a serious spill occur in this region. The moratorium will protect the livelihoods of communities on British Columbia's north coast by providing a heightened level of environmental protection while continuing to allow for community and industry resupply by small tanker. Mr. Speaker, Bill C-48 demonstrates that we do not support large shipments of crude oil or persistent oil products in this region. The British Columbia oil tanker moratorium will take a preventative approach to oil spills in the region so that Canada's coastal habitats, ecosystems, and marine species, including marine mammals, are able to thrive. In addition to establishing the moratorium, we're also taking steps through the Oceans Protection Plan to improve our incident prevention and response regime and address environmental concerns in the event of a marine accident. The role and authority of the Canadian Coast Guard is being strengthened to ensure rapid and efficient responses in case of a marine incident. The Canadian Coast Guard will offer training to Indigenous communities for search and rescue, environmental response, and incident command to allow for a greater role in marine safety in their community. We're implementing the incident command system and enhancing emergency coordination centres across the government in order to bolster our response capabilities. These measures will improve the coordination of response actions of departments and agencies when dealing with an incident by using a common response system. During the response to larger pollution incidents, our government quickly brings together relevant subject matter experts in the field of environmental protection who supply consolidated scientific and technical advice on environmental concerns, priorities, and spill countermeasure strategies. This ultimately enables an effective and timely response to pollution incidents. Clearly, Mr. Speaker, the oil tanker moratorium is just one of many initiatives in our comprehensive plan to protect the marine environment. The Oceans Protection Plan, which is the largest investment ever made in our oceans and waterways, and the Oil Tanker Moratorium Act are two concrete actions we are taking to ensure a clean and vibrant marine environment. These measures reinforce our determination to advance science and utilize valuable traditional knowledge to keep our waters and wildlife clean, safe, and healthy for generations to come. This is why, Mr. Speaker, we hope we can expect the support of the members present for the passage of this bill, which moves this critical agenda an important step forward in protecting our pristine environment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Resuming debate, the honourable member for Battleford Lloydminster.
Mr. Speaker, I will be sharing my time with the member for Beauport-Limoilou. Mr. Speaker, I stand in the House today to speak to Bill C-48, the Oil Tanker Moratorium Act, a bill that is yet another disappointment for all Canadians who want to see our country prosper. The Liberals may want Canadians to believe that this moratorium is in their interest, but that is just not the case. This legislation isn't justified by an environmental or economic study, nor is it supported by proper consultation with the impacted communities, industries, and experts. Rather, the legislation we have before us today is the fulfillment of political will, and its economic impact goes far beyond the prescribed geographical area in the legislation. In considering C-48, we must look at the full picture. The proposed moratorium is yet another hit to Canada's oil and gas sector, a sector that has already lost $80 billion in investment under this Prime Minister, under this Prime Minister's watch. That is the biggest decline in Canadian energy investment in 70 years. And just last week, Canadians found out that this Prime Minister's government gave taxpayer money to an environmental lobby group to hire an activist to protest against the Trans Mountain Pipeline project, a pipeline project that is supported by their environmental assessment and that they've told Canadians they support. Canadians deserve a government that is upfront with them, a government that doesn't undermine their prosperity. Championing Canada's energy sector should be common sense. The responsible development of our natural resources is essential to our country's prosperity. It is our second biggest export and provides tremendous economic opportunity. In fact, it employs hundreds of thousands of Canadians. It creates billions of dollars of tax revenue that benefits Canadians and communities across this country from coast to coast to coast. And we cannot dismiss the fact that oil produced and transported in Canada operates within strict environmental standards while also upholding human rights and workplace standards. The message that this government's action is sending is that it would rather import oil from countries like Saudi Arabia than create infrastructure to move Canadian oil across this country. And by obstructing Canada's access to the global market, they are opening the door for countries like Saudi Arabia, Russia, and Venezuela, countries that do not have the same environmental standards and human rights that Canada does. The demand for oil is not ceasing, it is growing. And I believe the world needs more Canadian oil. The fact is, Canada is capable of providing more energy, capable of providing greater energy security to Canada and the world. But to harness that opportunity, we need new infrastructure. We need pipelines and access to reach new markets. And to get that done, we need federal leadership. Not tomorrow, but today. Unfortunately, that is not what we have before us. What we have is another step forward in the Prime Minister's plan to phase out the oil sands. The United States is Canada's largest energy trading partner. This is an important relationship. But landlocking Canadian oil doesn't put our country on a path for long-term energy success. That's why the diversification of Canada's energy partners is also important. By not relying on a single market, we will reduce our economic risk and better protect the long-term health of our country's economy. The Asia-Pacific region is a large and valuable market opportunity. It is a market that can only be accessed through marine transport. The tanker moratorium proposed on the north coast of British Columbia hinders that access. The Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers has said the moratorium would cut off the most economic path to Asia and sends yet another signal to the investment community that Canada is not open for business. The Liberals are turning away business, and for what benefit? The moratorium bans oil tankers carrying more than 12,500 metric tons of oil from loading, unloading, or anchoring in the north coast of British Columbia. It doesn't ban tanker traffic. It doesn't take any substantial action to protect the environment. It penalizes an industry and prohibits communities in northern British Columbia from accessing economic opportunity. Let's contrast that with the real action to protect our coastlines. Our former Conservative government took strong action to ensure that Canada's tanker safety system is robust and modern. They introduced changes that included modernizing Canada's navigation system, improving inspections for all tankers, enhancing area response planning, increasing penalties for polluters, and building marine safety capacity in Indigenous communities. That is tangible action to protect our environment. Action that improves environmental protection in our waters and our coastline, all while keeping Canada on the right path to harness our economic opportunity. The legislation in front of us does not build on that meaningful action. As I've said, it builds on the Prime Minister's record of building roadblocks to stop the success of our energy sector. And it is not in the interest of Canadians. The Prime Minister already vetoed the Northern Gateway pipeline that would have brought economic opportunity to the impacted region. And now, if this ban is enforced, the north coast of British Columbia will be closed for energy business. And again, let's remember, that is closed for business without any meaningful consultation. A concern that is rightfully echoed by industry leaders and impacted communities. In fact, this tanker moratorium is even being pushed through without properly consulting coastal First Nations. There is considerable support among British Columbia's coastal First Nations who want to pursue energy development opportunities that are environmentally sound. And I find it quite hypocritical of this Liberal government to move ahead without that meaningful consultation, particularly given that they have committed to implementing the UN Declaration on Rights of Indigenous Peoples, including free, prior, and informed consent. It is no surprise that their actions are already being challenged. The Lac Kw'alaams are among 30 First Nations that are challenging the tanker ban in court. This ban prevents them from opportunities for future energy development on their land. It hinders their people from the economic benefits that it could yield. The Lac Kw'alaams Band have said, and I quote, they were disheartened that this bill that is directed at their territories was introduced without informed consent or adequate consultation from their people. The Eagle Spirit Energy Holdings Limited was working towards a pipeline project that would have yielded tremendous economic opportunity and helped Canadian oil reach the Asia-Pacific market. But with this ban, their project is essentially rendered useless. In response to the government's legislation, they have said there was no consultation with these communities harmfully impacted in the interior of British Columbia or those in Alberta, a situation which certainly falls short of the deep consultation the Crown requires of corporations proposing major resource development projects on the traditional lands of Indigenous peoples. Mr. Speaker, I cannot support this legislation. It cannot be overstated. This legislation takes no meaningful action to improve environmental protection in the north coast of British Columbia. It is not justified by science or safety. I cannot support the Liberal government's continued mismanagement of the energy sector. Many of my constituents work in the energy sector, and their livelihoods depend on it. Canada needs to diversify its energy trading partners, not introduce regulations and measures that will landlock their oil. The Prime Minister needs to show leadership. They need to start supporting energy projects that are determined to be safe for the environment and in the interest of Canadians. They need to stand up for our energy sector, and they need to stand up for Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Député de Longueuil-Saint-Hubert.
The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. I would like to thank my colleague for her speech. I think it is more than useful to debate these topics and to not look at them with an overly dogmatic perspective. We need to take into account everyone's realities. I would like to hear what she thinks, what we could bring to the debate to try and bring more information on oil production when it comes to the oil sands.
Member for Battleford's Lloydminster.
I would like to thank my honourable colleague for his question. I think, Mr. Speaker, I think it's very important that we look at the bigger picture. Canada relies heavily on their economy relies heavily on the oil industry as a whole. Coming from an area in Canada that has many different types of development of oil and gas, I think it's important to have those proper consultations with everybody, landowners, whether it be industries, First Nations, and see how we can all economically receive benefit from these projects, and to note that Canada, one of the highest, if not the highest, environmental standards with extracting oil, transporting oil, and also workplace standards for our Canadian residents that work in oil and gas. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Manning.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to congratulate my colleague from Battleford Lloydminster for a good speech and lots of information. We both came from provinces, from Alberta, from Saskatchewan, where oil sector is our bloodlines as our main income and main revenue, and as well for the rest of the country. The word on the street that this bill will really work against the industry, the oil industry, oil and gas, and will be a step forward into stopping and basically fighting the development of this sector. I'm not sure if she would share with me the same vision that we hear from people on the street.
The Honourable Member for Battleford's Lloydminster.
I'd like to thank my colleague for his question and comments. I live right in Lloydminster, Saskatchewan, Alberta. We are a very interesting city because we are the only bi-provincial city in all of Canada. So we rely on both provinces actually quite a lot. And the past couple years, my city has lost 8,000 to 10,000 residents because they have gone back home, typically East Coast, because they come out to Lloydminster to work. And I completely agree with my colleague. This is nothing more than to keep our natural resources in the ground, which is shameful, especially when, again, I'll repeat, our country has some of the highest environmental standards and regulations to begin with, as well as with transportation of our natural resources.
Honourable Deputy.
The Honourable Member for Beauport, Limoilou, for questions and comments. A short question.
It's a maiden speech on the recent election in a beautiful riding. And I know that my colleague, as all Conservative colleagues here and probably all party MPs, we go to our riding each weekend. We work hard. We have activities, community, spaghetti dinners, etc. And she will be able, I think, to share with us everything she hears from her constituents about the need to make sure that the Canadian oil can be exported outside the country. I mean, it's a major issue. How can we be still today in 2018 importing petroleum from dictatorship countries when we have all those resources here. So please, I ask my colleague if she can just share with us some of the comments she had from her constituents in her riding.
Battleford's Lloydminster.
I want to thank my colleague for his great question. I can tell you the constituents of Battleford's Lloydminster are very, very disappointed having the public safety minister from Saskatchewan, that he is not standing up for the constituents of Battleford's Lloydminster and people from Saskatchewan. They do not believe a word that this government says that they are for the extraction of our natural resources and our oil. I know many, many people who are going to make sure they get out and vote in this next coming up election and do everything in their power so we do not have a Liberal government. Thank you.
Prise de débat, l'honorable député.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Bhopal-Limoilou. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's always a pleasure to speak in this House. I would like to take the time to talk about my colleague who passed away recently. He passed away very suddenly. I never would have believed that possible. And I just want to say that I share the profound sadness. Of course, not as much as his family, who are dealing with a terrible loss, and his children won't be able to grow up with their father. It's a terrible, terrible loss. And I just wanted to say publicly that I encourage them to go on and to one day enjoy life again, and we're there to support them. I'd also like to recognize all of my constituents who are watching today. And I'd like to say that on Monday morning, there will be a press conference at my office where I will announce a very important initiative for the riding. So I invite everyone to watch television and read the newspapers at that time. Mr. Speaker, Bill C-48 aims to do nothing less than apply a moratorium on the west coast from Prince Rupert, a place where I went in 2004, a very interesting city, down to Port Hardy, which is in the north of Vancouver Island. And this moratorium would prevent oil tankers, including Canadian oil tankers, transporting over 12,500 tons of petrol to have access to Canada's internal waters. So essentially, it would prevent them from accessing Canadian ports. Now, this moratorium means that any future oil pipeline project or a marine port project to export our oil would never see the day. Certainly not north of Port Hardy on Vancouver Island. What we've seen this last year, or perhaps the last 3 years, Mr. Speaker, is an attempt on the part of the Liberal government to end the natural resource sector, and particularly oil in Canada, and to do so slowly but surely. Let's take the example of Northern Gateway. When the Liberals came to power, the first thing they did, and they even boast of this, is that they changed the environmental assessment processes, which are managed by the Board for Energy Projects in Canada. Now, Northern Gateway was about to be accepted, but following these changes, which weren't even based on scientific data, but rather based on Cabinet's political agenda, made the Northern Gateway project impossible, and so it was canceled. When I look at Bill C-48 today concerning the moratorium in the West Coast, I think, for a long time, the Liberals have been trying to make sure that Northern Gateway wasn't a success. It's not that Northern Gateway couldn't have passed the environmental assessments, but now they're saying, oh, well, there's a moratorium that would have prevented it from going forward anyway. The Prime Minister said not only that we should eventually phase out the oil sands, but he said again in Paris at the National Assembly there in front of 300 members of the National Assembly in Macron's government. And I'm sure they were happy to hear that, but Canadians were not happy to hear that, particularly those who live in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Alberta, who get the benefits of the oil industry and who ensure that all Canadians can enjoy the economic benefits of that industry. Now, my colleague from Prince Albert in Saskatchewan made a speech this morning that was very remarkable. He explained that it's very difficult for Saskatchewan families to understand the Liberal government's successive decisions because they seem to state clearly that this government is against natural resource development in Canada's West. And yet this accounts for maybe 60% of the economy in the West, perhaps 40% of Canada's economy as a whole. Now, I can understand them saying that we need to look at climate change, and it's very tedious to hear them talk about this every day because we believe in climate change. That's not the issue. But this is a very complex system, and we can never forget that at the heart of the resource industry, there are people who are suffering. There are people who have to put food on the table. Nothing has changed since prehistory. Everyone needs to eat to live. That's just a fact of life. And the Liberals are always in this postmodern, post-materialist ideology where they're trying to save the polar bears. But we, the Conservatives, want to focus on ensuring that families can get through the day, Mr. Speaker. And that is the #1 responsibility of any Canadian government. Mr. Speaker, it's totally absurd to think that today, in 2018, most of oil consumed all across Canada, including in the East and in Ontario and Quebec, actually comes from Venezuela or Saudi Arabia, when we have the 3rd greatest oil reservoir in the world here in Canada. And that's without even talking about the Arctic Ocean that belongs to Canada. Well, not the whole Arctic Ocean, but part of it. So imagine all of the potential that there is there. And as I've said to many of my colleagues, my Marxist-Leninist colleagues, of course, I often tell them, listen, oil is going to continue to increase because of consumption in China, for example. It's going to continue to increase until 2065 at least. Can we say no to $1 trillion of economic benefits in Canada? Of course we can't. How are we going to pay for our hospitals and schools, Mr. Speaker? Our social services? How are we going to pay for the socialist government's fancy plans? The #1 responsibility of any Canadian government is to meet the needs of its citizens, and that's what they should be doing. Now, I've been talking a lot here. I need to get to my point. As my colleague for Prince Albert said, this is a decision that was made in Cabinet. So the moratorium, Bill C-48, it was made in Cabinet without any consultation, without any study in a parliamentary committee. Every day the Liberals brag about being the first government in the history of Canada that has consulted so much. They've done more consultation than anyone in 3 years. So how can they justify the fact that this moratorium will have drastic consequences for Canada's prosperity, for the economic development of the Western provinces? How can they say that how can they justify the fact that they didn't do any pan-Canadian consultations or committee study? And they didn't even consult the 9 Indigenous nations that live on that territory. I think the Liberal government should be concerned about that. And that brings me to my point, Mr. Speaker. I have a legal complaint that was filed at the Supreme Court of BC, and I'm... So it was filed by an Indian band in the region where the moratorium is applied. So that's 9 of these groups. And the defendant, of course, is the government of BC. But what's really interesting in this filing is that the lawyer says
includes and is adjacent to an open and safe deep water shipping corridor and contains land suitable for development as an energy corridor and for protected deep water ports for development and operation of a maritime installation as defined in Bill C-48 Oil Tanker Moratorium Act. The plaintiff Aboriginal title encompasses the right to choose to what uses the land can be put, including use as a marine installation subject only to justifiable environmental assessment and approval legislation. L'avocat continue en disant
The lawyer continues by saying,
action by Canada discriminate against the plaintiff, so the Aboriginal, guys, okay, the Aboriginal, the plaintiffs, by prohibiting the development of land in the claim area, by being an area that has one of the best deep water ports and safest waterways in Canada, while permitting such development elsewhere, like in the Gulf, St. Lawrence Gulf, St. Lawrence Riverway, Atlantic Ocean. So, Mr. Speaker, mon point est très simple.
My point is simple. This is a legal argument showing that not only does this land belong to the Indigenous people, but they weren't consulted. And also that these Indigenous people are going to take the BC government to court, and this will undoubtedly go to the Supreme Court because this has to do with their ancestral rights, their titles. So, really, this shows that this government has done very shoddy work on this. Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for
Longueuil-Saint-Hubert.
Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I have to say that I find it very pleasant to listen to the member for Beauport-Limoilou because he's very clear and he articulates his thoughts very clearly, and it's nice to hear intelligent arguments. I mean, I don't agree with them, of course, but they were well presented and they were very relevant points. But I do want to correct you when you say that liberals are people who say that they're ideological and all that. No, they're not. They're opportunists. That's all they are. That's it. So that said, I would have liked to hear you talk about the nature. Now, sometimes people say that Canada's oil is the cleanest in the world. But honestly, could we talk about the major problem associated with the oil sands or the tar sands, depending on how positive we want to be? Can we at least hear what you think about new technologies that might make oil sands development more acceptable? Because transporting oil is okay, but the extraction of oil is really harmful to the environment. I would remind the honourable member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert that when the word you is used in the House, it refers to the Speaker. So I would remind him to direct his comments through the Chair. The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou. Well, Mr. Speaker, listen. Canadian oil is the most highly regulated oil in the world. It really is very strictly regulated when it comes to the environment, when it comes to transportation, when it comes to royalties and so on. So how is it possible that in 2018, let's think of our founding fathers here. Now, do you think it's normal that we have hundreds and hundreds of huge tankers crossing the Atlantic every single day, and they come all the way to our coast? And today, scientists say that we have the third largest reservoir of oil in the world, Mr. Speaker. Every year, our technology to capture carbon is getting better. So it's clear that we have to improve our environmental practices, of course. But at the same time, is it legitimate to say to our grandchildren that we don't want to take our share of the pie for the next 40 years as China and India consume more and more oil, and they won't be focused on environmental arguments? They are in the middle of an industrial revolution, and it's their right to use oil, and we can sell them up to $1 trillion worth of oil, which will allow us to fund hospitals and schools. Thank you. Questions and comments? The honourable member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's rare that we get to have a back and forth like this. I'd like to ask my colleague the following question. when he talks about $1 trillion in sales, so this is a lot of money, but could we know if the people who own oil in Canada really want to invest money to improve the extraction process? So essentially what happens is that vapor is heated to get the oil out of the oil sands, and that vapor, it comes from natural gas, which obviously has a lot of CO2 emissions, and that's the biggest problem there. And then, of course, you have water, which is contaminated with all of these different chemical products, which end up in tailings ponds, and then this makes the front page of the National Geographic. So what would incentivize industry to make this process cleaner? The Honourable Member for Bhopal-Limoilou. Mr. Speaker, the problem with environmentalists and the NDP is it's always the same thing. Since the 19th century, and particularly over the last 40 years, there has been an incredible record of environmental success, not only in Canada, but all around the world, against acid rain, against pollution in our cities. If you look at London in 1945, it would be worse than Beijing today. There have been remarkable developments in terms of environmental protection. And now the NDP, the Liberals, and other environmentalists have never noticed all of the efforts that Canada is doing to achieve this. We are in a transition towards the green economy, but it's not true that we can change the entire procurement chain in just a few years, Mr. Speaker. That's not what we're going to do, and that's why we need to benefit from our resources now. Resuming debate. Is the House ready for the question?
The question est la suivante.
The question is as follows. Mr. Garneau, seconded by Ms. Le Boutillier, moves that Bill C-48, an act respecting the regulation of vessels that transport crude oil or persistent oil to or from ports or marine installations located along British Columbia's north coast, be concurred in, or rather be now read a third time and do pass. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? All those in favor of the motion will please say yea. All those opposed will please say nay. In my opinion, the yeas have it. Pursuant to Standing Order 45, the deferred recorded division stands deferred until May 7th at the normal hour of adjournment.
Member for Hamilton West, Ancaster Dundas, is rising on a point of order.
Yes, I am, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. I think if you seek it, you would find unanimous consent for the following: that notwithstanding any standing order or usual practice of the House, that the recorded division on the third reading of C-48 Oil Tanker Moratorium Act be further deferred until the expiry of the time provided for oral questions on Tuesday, May 8th, 2018.
Member have the unanimous consent of the House to propose the motion. Agreed. The House has heard the terms of the motion. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Carried. Accordingly, the recorded division stands to further deferred until Tuesday, May 8th at the expire of the time provided for oral questions. The honourable member for Hamilton West, Ancaster Dundas.
Mr. Speaker, I think if you seek it, you will find unanimous consent to see the clock at 1:30.
Is there unanimous consent for this particular kind of magic? Agreed. 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 The House will now proceed to the consideration of private members' business as listed on today's order paper.
Private members' business, consideration at report stage of Bill C-377, an act to change the name of the electoral district of Châteauguay-Lacolle, standing in the name of Ms. Shanahan.
There being no motions at report stage, the House will now proceed without debate to the putting of the question on the motion to concur in the bill at report stage.
Madame Shanahan, appuyez.
Mrs. Shanahan, seconded by Mr. Graham, moves that Bill C-377, an act to change the name of the electoral district of Châteauguay-Lacolle, be concurred in at report stage. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion?
Que tous ceux qui pour la motion.
All those in favor of the motion will please say yay.
Que tous ceux qui s'y opposent.
All those opposed will please say nay.
À mon avis, les oui l'emportent.
In my view, the yeas have it.
Premièrement, l'article 98 du règlement.
Pursuant to Standing Order 98, the recorded division stands deferred until Wednesday, May 9th, 2018, immediately before the time provided for private members' business.
It being 102, we're back to 102 now. It's a bit confusing, but this House stands adjourned until next Monday at 11 a.m. pursuant to Standing Order 24-1. Have a bit of fun with it.